Yes. We're going live right now, okay? Yeah, I gotta hook it up so that we get a Patron cam. I gotta figure out how to do that. Yes. We're going live right now, okay? And let's see. Yeah. So, hope everybody is well this Sunday morning. And just kind of funny, I was looking at the. I always have the stream up on my computer to make sure that it's working properly. And when I said that we need to have a Tapring cam up, the automatic subtitles from Google said the Tapring, or it said the Supreme cam, and Tapring is definitely not the Supremes or a Burrito Supreme or anything of that nature. So I just thought that was funny. Anyway, and yes, I know you need something to chew on. Here, have one of your chew sticks. There you go. Yeah, you don't chew on fingers, you chew on chew sticks. Yeah, you'll understand when you're older. You probably won't. Anyway, I apologize for starting late. I know that excuses are like certain orifices on the human body, and that's saying that if you haven't heard before is something that everybody should understand, but the everybody has one. But the truth of the matter is that it was just I'm with dealing with EMS, I have good days and bad days as far as getting out of bed, and today was a bad one. It was very difficult for me to physically get out of bed, and that's one of the weird challenges of my life these days. Is on some days it is literally a physical challenge to get out of bed. And I don't mean, I don't want to get up this morning. I mean, we all deal with that, sure. I mean, like, the physical pain level is so high, and the physical weakness level is so low, or the strength level, I guess you would say, is so low that it makes it virtually impossible to pull myself out of bed without help. So that's and today was one of those days. So, but I managed to fight my way out, and I will continue to do so as long as I am able, because that's what I need to do. I mean, I'm not going to stop. And thank you so much, Joseph, one of my absolute favorite atheists.
Greetings from the future.
Thank you, Alice. Oh, it's hallowed on the salties. And just for that, Joseph, come here, you. Just for that, I'll let you get the first kiss from the puppy here for the day. Here you go. Go ahead. Good. You can get a kiss from the puppy. Right? Good. Right. Yes. There. Yeah. All right. And she's like, "What are you doing, you idiot?" I was all chilling with my chew stick, and you had to pick me up. All right, here, you can have your chew stick back. There you go. Tristan says, "Good morning, sir. Good to see you." Thank you, Tristan. It is good to be here. And it's funny because it's one of those situations where we need to learn as Christians Um, one of the lessons we need to learn, and it can be very difficult sometimes, especially in this modern hyper privileged age that we live in, which I will tell you, I get so sick of everybody complaining about how life is so unfair when and how angry they are. And I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on Bird of Prey 5 for a second. I know it was hilarious. Look, I'm the first person to say it was hilarious. But we get so angry and so worked up over things like having to select English off of a list of languages. Like, that's a real problem, right? Oh my gosh, I had to press 1 to speak English on the phone. That's a problem. That's not a problem. I mean, come on. That's not even an inconvenience. You know, that's just. I mean, that's kind of nice that we get to pick a language. Now, I understand that in the United States in the 21st century, almost everyone speaks English. And heck, worldwide, it's true that in doing business, most people still speak English. But that doesn't change the fact that there are a huge number of people. And yes, the dog she is so adorable. It's Puka, our little Pomeranian, does not like her very much. They don't fight or anything, but Puka just does not like her very much. And I think Puka is just realizing that there's actually a creature on this planet that's cuter than her, and she doesn't like it very much at all. And hey, Alex, good to see you. So, there are plenty of other languages in the world besides English. And if a company wants to better service its potential customers, or even if a governmental agency wants to better service its potential constituents by offering services in multiple languages, and you can select different languages from a list, that's kind of a nice service to be able to offer. And so, yes, it makes sense that the first thing that you hear when you call a customer service line is press. And by the way, notice that most of them, the first thing you hear is press 1 for English. You know, because and the reason you'll hear that first is because they know that most people speak English. Um, uh, so and uh, um, Joseph says, "Me England talk only tiny." Oh, don't try to give me that crap, Joseph. I know you're good. You can speak English better than most people in the United States that I know. And Alex says, "Like the candle feels more like a you know what." The candle feels more like a you know what. No, I don't know what. I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Sorry, you lost me on that one. So yeah, I have no idea. And but Alex says, "I've been to Strasbourg land. That was fought over forever. Everything was doubled in French and German." You see, and that's a perfect example. But yeah, and in the United States, the most common languages here in the U.S. are English and Spanish. And a lot of people think that's... Oh, okay, gotcha. As in the you know what life. Gotcha. Thank you. Yes, and I just like the scented candles, to be honest. But yeah, I like these. Whenever we move, one thing that I'm going to do is when we do move is, since I'm going to have a room that will be set up just for broadcasting, is I'll be able to actually arrange the room specifically for it when we move in, and I'll probably put a few shelves, because you know how you always see people with these, fancy schmancy sets. I'm not going to get all fancy with like well lit shelves and crap like that. I'll probably put some shelves back there, and I'll probably put some candles on the shelves. And then on the shelves, I'll put stuff that's important to me. I'm not going to put stuff to, like a lot of these people put what I consider almost like virtue signaling stuff. Like they put stuff on these shelves that they don't give a crap about, but that they put there in order to appeal to their audience. But like all the stuff you see on the shelf behind me here is either stuff that I take great pride in, or stuff that has been given to me by you guys. For example, the bear there, the Spock bear, that was given to me by Mr. Miles. You may not know that. You can't see it, but the Orville was given to me by Thomas Potts. The little nitro gummy bear, even though I've eaten it, but the box there for the little nitro gummy bear, that was given to me by Darren Wagner. The globes there, I believe, were given to me by England DG. So stuff like that, those were things that has a special meaning to me, right? And then I also keep some of my study Bibles and stuff like that I actually use. So that's all stuff that's important to me. But when I set up the room that I will be permanently working in once we move, I'll have that stuff, sure, but I'll also be able to set up enough room to have more of these wonderful scented candles, and that way, when I'm doing the church live stream, I can have a bunch of candles going, and maybe I'll have to talk to Piano Dean and see if he can do a churchy sounding Gregorian chant. It'd be fun to do like a Gregorian chant version of like the Star Trek theme or something. Anyway, back to it. Professor Brady says, even had to press 1 to get this stream in English. And Alex is in the house, has arrived. Good, so we can get started. So, but my point there is not to go off on pressing 1 for English. It's just to kind of suggest that we need to sometimes stop and appreciate what we do have, no matter what it is. All right. So whether it's, like I got to tell you, when things are stripped away, we have to appreciate the things that aren't. And sometimes in life, things get stripped away, but those things that are left are always the core things, And I'm not going to lie, you guys know I've been through a lot these last couple of years. It's been an extraordinarily difficult last couple of years. And looking forward, what's left? What's left in my life? Well, moving forward, I mean, my church is not changing. My family's not changing. You guys are not changing. And honestly, that's the most important part. My relationships are the most important thing. The house I'll miss, but it's not the most important thing. You know, the stuff that we have to get rid of, yeah, I'll miss some of it, but it's not nearly as important as my relationship with my wife, as my relationship with you guys. You know, it's just not. And so if us moving to Metropolis and, you know, basically reshaping our lives to be living on disability and that kind of thing, if that's just what we got to deal with, hey, you know, that's just stuff we can adapt to. You know, some stuff, it'll be difficult, sure. But that's easy. But the important stuff is all still there. And that's why I think that in the Bible, Christ talks about when he's confronted with what is the greatest commandment. It's very straightforward. He says, love God with all your heart and all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That all of the law and all of the prophets rest on these two things. And what's interesting about that if Christ, because Christ, when asked for what is the greatest commandment, he gives two commandments, not one. And it's not that he's giving a twofer. But it's that there is not a singular greatest commandment. It's that these two commandments are both primary. And there's a reason for it. If you look at the Ten Commandments, if you actually examine the Ten Commandments, 4 of the Ten Commandments deal with how you treat God. Things like putting no other gods before him. You know, not taking, you know, not blaspheming God and stuff like that. But 6 of the commandments are about how you treat your fellow man. Do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not steal. Stuff like that. So 60% of the 10 commandments are about interpersonal relationships with your fellow man. And so to say that the greatest commandment is just to love God is only half the story. Because yes, you can love God without loving man, but then you're not doing God's will. And yes, you can love man without loving God, but then you're not, you're a humanist at best. And don't get me wrong, I know some wonderful humanists out there. In fact, there's a couple of them in the chat right now. And I'm sure they're not taking that as an insult, because I don't mean it as one. But if you are a Christian and you're trying to figure out how we're supposed to live, you've got to do both of those things. And loving your fellow man is a challenge sometimes, because people are dicks. And I know I'm kind of rambling on a little today, but people are definitely, So, Joseph says, my wife is way hotter than my neighbors, no problem there. Well, That may be, but you're not supposed to covet any of your neighbor's stuff. Anyway, and Alex, we don't need to get vulgar here. This is the church life stream. Alex Lemons, I should say which Alex I'm talking to, since there are multiple Alexes in the chat. But in essence, as far as dealing with your question in a more without getting too vulgar on it, when it deals to masturbation is really what your question is about. The problem with masturbation is that it is ultimately a self-centered act, and as a Christian, you are supposed to be selfless. So take that into consideration. And because you're supposed to be considering others before yourself. Let's see. Alex, the other Alex says, my neighbor is a Karen, like liberal, who sponsors local drag shows and hates Orange Man, but she makes a good drinking buddy and likes TOS. God really tested me. You know what? And that is a great example of exactly the kind of person you are called to love. And I will tell you, and one thing that because we sometimes we are called to love the people we don't want to love. Your next door neighbor may be a complete and total jerk, right? Like, depending on where they could be politically the dead opposite of you. They might think that, whatever you like, they hate. Like they might think that T'Pring here is just an ugly little rat dog, and they've got a big old Rottweiler or something, and they want to feed her to them. They could just be the worst person ever. And God has called me to love that person. And I need to learn to do that. And it's a challenge because loving people is tough because people are jerks. So, that's, and Yosef says, we're not that rich. He has no staff. I'm not sure what you mean.
The spice must flow.
And
corporate _ HR $2. So are you still officially employed or what?
No, actually. So thank you for the $2 corporate HR. But I am officially unemployed as of 3 days ago. Well, 2 days. October 1st, I was unemployed. That's made it, I feel, I'll be completely honest with you. I've been really struggling with some depression these last couple of days. And it's been difficult for me. Because dealing, I know that I knew the change was coming. It's not that I didn't know it was happening, but it's now kind of set in that, I'm not working, and so and it's not going to go back to the old way. I was, up until October 1st, there was always a possibility that I would go back to work. Now, no. Work is gone. And look, the company that I worked for, they, they had their issues. Um, there were some things that I disagreed with them about. Most notably, some of the programs that they did to encourage basically every group under the planet except for my own. But they were also, I have to admit, that they're treating me well now. So I can't say they're all bad. But now that I'm no longer employed by them, I can tell you, I was an employee of Verizon Wireless, customer service supervisor for them. And it's just so bizarre now that that I'm not working there anymore. And it's just, it's just really, really bizarre to me. So it's going to take me some time to process. And I don't know. It's just difficult. And Random Menace says, I'm not sure if I can really. Yeah, I'd leave that particular held message there. So for that one, I'm look. It's a church live stream. We don't need to get too crass on the church live stream. Seriously, guys, come on. Got my neighbor a Star Trek book for her birthday. That's cool. And PK Dan, thank you.
Feel ya about reality has set in about not working. Here's some stash to buy some coffee to help deal with reality and all its woes.
Thank you so much, BK. I do appreciate that. And it's like, and the battle is,
Verizon_wireless $2. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. And the funny thing is, I gotta say, when T-Mobile hired that guy to do their commercials, I gotta say that was brilliant of them. But yeah. So that's one of the reasons that when people start talking about cell phones, I would tend to clam up. Because if I start talking about cell phone carriers, I would have to, the company policy was that I can't comment on cell phone carriers without saying I'm a Verizon employee. But if I start spouting my opinions as a Verizon employee and I start talking about politics, then I can get in trouble for that. Because Verizon is a very liberal-minded company, and I'm not a particularly liberal-minded person. So if my opinions of Verizon opinions come in conflict, then I could lose my job over that. And just like with Gina Carano, I didn't want that to happen. So that's why I always kept my work life and my streaming life separate. And I think that that's the way you should, and since I wasn't a spokesperson for Verizon, that wasn't really a problem. And let's see, I read somewhere that Noah's wife was descended from Cain. Is that true? No, it is not. And Robert says, I'm having some issues with my Verizon mobile phone. Well, that's nice, Robert. Call their customer service line. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help you. CD said, but I will not help you. And I would get the calls that, I since I was a customer service supervisor, I only got escalated calls as it was. And I will tell you, I was good at my job. And I will miss it very much. Even though there are things I didn't like about the corporate politics, there are things I didn't like about the job. I was very, very good at it. In fact, out of 500 plus people in the company, I was ranked 14th in 2020. So, at least I went out on a high note. Let's see. CD says, I can understand I had to stop working in 2006 because of uncontrolled epilepsy. Yeah. And I kept saying by keeping my mind occupied, video games, books, and more. Well, I will tell you, once we move, we've been talking with my wife, with friends at the church and stuff. Basically, the plan is to, we'll stay involved at the church, obviously. Hopefully, since we'll be moving to Illinois, if all goes well, with the advent of certain legal substances in Illinois that are not legal in Tennessee, we'll be able to get a little better control on the pain, and that will allow me to ride my bike more, or trike, and lose a little bit of this excess weight. But besides that, it'll be hanging out with you guys, and for sanity, being active at the church, and that's going to be and my bike. That'll pretty much be, and of course a little T'Pring here. And one thing I hope, and that hopefully T'Pring will be good for, is I want to make a little platform on my trike for her to sit on so that she can go with me on my rides, and then get her like a little bike riding outfit, because Chihuahuas need to wear clothes because they're wimps when it comes to cold weather. You just told us you worked in telecom. No, because as soon as I start talking about that, there's only in the United States, at least, there's only a handful of major telecoms, and so I didn't want to get into that. And people would say, "Well, do you work at AT&T? Well, do you work at as soon as you start saying that kind of thing, people start asking questions, and I just left it alone." Time to unleash the saltiness on your opinions. What do you think of Patriot Mobile? Do you keep trying to switch from AT&T? What do you think of Patriot Mobile? Keep trying to switch from AT&T. Well, as far as these little fly-by-night mobile companies, I'll tell you, Alex, they're all the same. Mint Mobile, Patriot Mobile, all these little mobile companies, they're exactly the same. What they do is they don't own any infrastructure. They all they do is they piggyback off of the big three, right? Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon, and they and they take advantage of federal regulation that says that Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon have to rent space on their towers for X number of dollars. And so they're basically exactly the same as a prepaid service. And they'll say, "Ooh, we're only going to charge you X dollars per month, and we're cheaper than the big guys, and we give you great coverage." What they don't tell you is that in the event of an emergency, you get bumped first. So, for example, let's say that a hurricane hits Florida, and you're on Patriot Mobile or Mint Mobile or any of these little guys. Then guess what happens? You lose service before any AT&T customers or Sprint customers or Verizon customers. That's just a fact. And your service is restored after AT&T and Verizon and Sprint. So, yes, they're cheaper, generally speaking. But the only reason that, what they do is they say, they call themselves Patriot or Mint or, Green or whatever. That's just a gimmick to get you. If you are signing up for a mobile plan because of politics, you are being swindled. Trust me, you are being swindled. And here I thought you were a costume vigilante. Your name would have been the Curmudgeon Caveman. Nope, I'm definitely not a costume vigilante. Although I sure could use that bat knee brace from The Dark Knight Rises. What was it like growing up in Bedrock? Did you hang out with Fred and Barney? Yeah, they were my neighbors. Jerk. And Robert says, Patriot Mobile runs on the Sprint, aka T-Mobile service now. Sprint is horrible in rural areas. Well, I'll tell you, so 5G will change that to a certain extent. And that's because, and just so you know, there's two different types of 5G technology. There's long band and short band 5G. The long band 5G is that's what T-Mobile's been talking about. And basically what that does is a long band 5G tower now has massively increased range. And so, and Verizon has that as well. But the way that it works is that it makes it so that you can get nationwide 5G coverage on very few towers. And it makes it so that it's much, much easier to get that coverage. The problem is that it's really no faster than 4G. And then you have your short band 5G, which has shorter range than standard 4G towers. In fact, very short range, but the speed is faster than a fiber line to your house. And that's the 5G that everybody wants. But in rural communities, that's, it would be crazy. You'd have to, like in a rural community, you would have to have a cell tower like on everybody's ranch. But yeah. Patriot Mobile is sponsored by Glenn Beck, so Patriot Mobile will be deleted by the big three. No, you know what? And Mint Mobile is sponsored by Ryan Reynolds. So what? You know what, Alex? If we wanted to, honestly, and I'm being absolutely serious here right now, if we really wanted to, if we pooled our resources, all of us right now, and like everybody gave me all their money, right? We could start our own mobile company. We could call it the Salty Mobile Network and put it out there. It's not that hard. You make it sound, oh, well, it's Glenn Beck's mobile company. All Glenn Beck did was use the loophole in the law that says that they have to let them use their space. Anybody can do it. And all you're doing is giving money to Sprint through Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck is just a middleman. I'm sorry, I would not, you're paying less money, sure. But guess what? You're also getting crappier service. So you're getting Sprint Mobile Lite and using Glenn Beck as a middleman. Or you could use, I don't know who it is, but say Verizon Lite and using Ryan Reynolds as a middleman if you want Mint Mobile. Or you're using Verizon Lite and you get it using Virgin as a middleman. That's all those things are. So honestly, if you're in the United States, if you want good service, you get from one of the big three. If you want to save money, then pick a card, any card. And, but don't expect good service. When the big moment came, did you lose your virginity to Wilma or Betty? Really, Alex? I mean, come on. I asked you to not make it crass. Can you? And doesn't the fast 5G almost need line of sight to the tower? Yes. That's why it's really only being used in major metropolitan areas. The fast 5G has problems with going through heavy construction. The fast 5G has problems with, like, it won't go through hills and stuff like that. So yeah, the fast 5G is really only designed to work in urban areas. So but it is awesome. I will tell you, it is freaking awesome. Uh, And Robert says, Rob Braxman Tech YouTube channel explained the 5G stuff really well. It's not true 5G. True 5G isn't omnidirectional. It's just a higher tier of 4G bandwidth. Well, it's a little more than just a higher tier of 4G bandwidth. It is a different technology. I don't know who Rob Braxman is, but yeah, it's not the same tech.
Kuroga_mobile $2. Coming soon. 7G technology. The mobile company powered by orphans.
And thank you, Kuroga Mobile. And also, just so you guys know, and this is something that's important to note as well, since we're going tech instead of talking about religion, since now you guys know where I work, or used to work. But 5G does not mean anything. All right, so just so you guys know, as far as there's no like government standard to what 5G means. All 5G means is 5th generation. That's all it means. As it does not mean that there's no standard to what 5G means. 5G doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to T-Mobile and AT&T and Verizon. All right. There's nothing standardized about this stuff. So if someone wants to say, like you were saying, that this person on the internet saying what true 5G is, there's no such thing as true 5G. And literally anything, you could put out anything and call it 5G, and there's no, there's no standard. So who can say it's right or wrong? That's like putting new and improved on a box of any product. So, yeah. But I can, and so I can't tell you about, I can't tell you about Sprint T-Mobile's 5G except for what I know from working at Verizon. And I can't tell you anything about AT&T's 5G project, what they're doing, and I haven't even heard much from AT&T on 5G. I can only really tell you about Verizon's 5G. And I can tell you that Verizon's 5G is not just 4G amped up. And Alex actually asks a religious question. Who is your favorite actor to play Jesus and why? I'm going to go with, now I can't remember the guy's name, which is it's horrible, but the guy that played him in Passion of the Christ. I thought he knocked it out of the park. And why? Because he actually spoke Aramaic. And I loved it. So, and I think that they were, they were genuinely trying to go for some accuracy in that film. And Robert says you should check out YouTube channel Rob Braxman. He runs his own tech company. Look, I'm sure he's a smart guy, but here's the thing. I don't care. I don't get me wrong. Jim Caviezel, thank you. Robert, I am no longer employed by Verizon Wireless, and therefore 5G technology is no longer a part of my life. Other than the fact that I have a 5G phone. That's the extent of my 5G tech, right? I am no longer working on the 5G network. I'm no longer involved in any of the insider information on 5G. And so I'm not going to keep up on it because I can't do anything with it. And it's not, and I'm not attacking you, Robert. I'm just saying I don't want to know because I can't do anything with it. It's just like, look, before I worked for Verizon, I worked for Comcast in engineering, by the way, working on their plant. And I can tell you a whole lot more about the coax fiber hybrid network that Comcast uses than I can tell you about Verizon's 5G network. But my information on that network is still a few years old because I haven't bothered to update myself since I stopped working there. Because when I'm done with something, I'm done with it. That's just the kind of person I am. When I turn my back on something, I turn my back on something. And so when I'm no longer employed at a company for whatever reason, I mean, in the case of Comcast, it was by choice. In the case of Verizon, obviously, it was because of health. But now since I know that I'm not going back, there's no point in keeping up on the technology because I'm never going to, I am never going to be troubleshooting Verizon tech again. And I don't want to, so I'm not going to beat myself up and make myself suffer by keeping up on it. Or trying to. Overall, do you think technology, this is an interesting question from Alex Bogey. Overall, do you think technology is bad, good, or neutral for religion? Good for religion. Well, I think it's good, and it's bad, and it's neutral. It's kind of funny. It's good if it's applied properly. Like, for example, it's funny. Last week, our pastor actually talked about this a little bit. For example, look at what we're doing right now. Okay? I'm talking to 20 people on the internet about God. Granted, we were talking about 5G a second ago, but we're talking about God. I'm talking to a group of people who are mixed up Christians, atheists, agnostics, right? And I reach out to people every single week and throughout the week. And I talk to, and I'm able to reach out to these people and build relationships with people thanks to modern technology. How do I say that's a bad thing? Now, that's the good. The bad is that people also use the same technology to put out false doctrines or to put out just very, very shady stuff. I mean, yeah, the same technology can be used to abuse it, but that goes back to the neutral part. The technology itself is neither good or bad. It's how it's used. So ultimately, Alex, the answer is neutral, but it's all depends on how it's used. But good question. BK Dan says, comedic religious question: Who did a better God, George Burns in Oh God, or Morgan Freeman in Bruce Almighty? That's tough. Because I know a lot of the younger people don't remember George Burns in Oh God, but he was just as shocking as Morgan Freeman was in Bruce Almighty for our generation. Because see God smoking a cigar was this old man. They were both great, but I have not seen Oh God in such a long time. I would have to see it again. And, it's hard to say. I remember loving that movie, but I can't remember it well enough to give an honest answer. I remember that there were 3 movies. I remember there was Oh God Book 2, and Oh God, You Devil, where George Burns played God and the devil. But, but I don't remember. And you know, man, and I remember. Oh God, the first one was the only good one of the three. But I'd have to go back and rewatch it, and it's been so long. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but I might want to watch that again. I'd have to watch. You know, that would be a good one. That would be a good double feature for movie night with Matthew. Sometime would be Oh God and Bruce Almighty. Although Bruce Almighty, you know, I'll say this: Bruce Almighty. If you were to ask me which is a better movie, I would probably pick Oh God. Because Bruce Almighty, I think, gets a little filthy for a movie that deals with theological type issues. Oh God, I don't believe goes dirty the way the Bruce Almighty does.
I think tech is leaning bad because of addiction.
That's an interesting point, Alex, but I don't think that... But you see, then you could argue that anything you could be addicted to is bad. But do you think that, for example, do you think alcohol is bad? Well, Jesus drank alcohol. But people get addicted to alcohol all the time. It's when we even have a name for it, alcoholism, right? What about sex? People get addicted to sex, but I certainly don't think sex is a bad thing. In fact, I would, and I happen to know a pastor that would agree with me on this statement. Sex is not only a gift from God, but the greatest gift from God. So I don't necessarily think that just because it's something that people can become addicted to means that it's a bad thing. Because addiction is not the fault of the thing. It's the fault of the person who loses control. Addiction is a person giving in to pleasures of the flesh. It's a person who craves pleasure to the point where they want that.
Oh God is streaming on Netflix. Checked.
Oh, very cool. I'll have to check that out then. Thank you. But addiction is honestly, that's all it is a addiction of any kind is a person who craves pleasures of the flesh and doesn't have the self-control to withhold it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, oh, addiction is easy to beat. It's not. But that's what it is. And so the thing that you're addicted to is not at fault for the addiction.
Controls the spice, controls the universe.
The levels of tech addiction higher than alcohol.
Maybe. But that doesn't change the fact. If you are the kind of person who is, what do they call it, an addictive personality, then you need to check yourself, right? That's, I think that, I do think that people do become addicted to all sorts of things. There are people that are addicted to just about any, I'll be honest, people are addicted to just about anything that gives them any kind of pleasure, right? Food. Lots of people addicted to food. I would probably count myself in that category to a certain extent, and that's why I'm so fat. And the funny thing is, now that I've cut back on eating, but my metabolism has slowed down to the point where it's like my body's like, yep, too late. So there's food addiction, there's stimulus addiction, where people just need to constantly, there's adrenaline addiction, there's obviously drug addiction. And some addictions are obviously now there are some addictions that can be chemically induced, right? Particularly when we talk about chemical stuff, like drugs. But for the most part, it comes down to a person craving pleasure. And people don't generally go trying out drugs because they don't have some kind of addiction problem already. You know, please, drugs for pleasure. It's, the funny thing is like if you're taking drugs for medicinal purposes, it does happen occasionally, but most of the time when people are taking drugs for medicinal purposes, they don't become addicts. And I'll even count myself among that, because I've taken the medicinal herb for medicinal purposes. And look, now that I live in an area where it's illegal, I'm not taking it. It's not a matter of addiction, because I would, if we move to Illinois, I would immediately start taking it again so that I can deal with the pain. But if I'm in an area where it's illegal, I don't take it. It's not a matter of addiction, it's a matter of treatment. Let's see. Anyway, before you wreck yourself, finish the quote. Not sure what you mean. What did I say that was going to finish with before you wreck yourself? Definitely have an addictive person. Definitely have an addictive personality. Also addicted to food, alcohol, and sex. With a tech problem, that's almost no women can resist the attention of men everywhere. Instagram. Well, I think the tech thing is all the tech problem. I think the tech addiction is a combination of things. For some people, it comes down to attention. Like you were talking about with Instagram. That's, that like if you're talking about people that are addicted to the social media thing, whether it be getting likes on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube videos and all that. Not talking about making money, I'm talking about getting likes. That's people that are addicted to affirmation. And that's a real thing. And that exists both in the real world, so to speak, and online. So that's not a tech addiction. That's just an online manifestation of their addiction to affirmation. They're just using tech to feed their addiction. So, that's like saying that that someone has a tech addiction because they're using an electronic needle to inject their drugs. No, they have an addiction to the drug, but they're using an electronic needle to inject it. You see the difference? So the tech is just the needle. Alex says, if you were producing a biblical anthology drama series, who would you want to cast as Cain and Abel? That's a tough one, because Cain and Abel, generally speaking, I mean, the classical thing to do is that you always have them with these big beards, and that's something I've never particularly liked, is that when I was a kid and watching biblical dramas, every male had big bushy beards, and I could never tell anyone apart. And so it always drove me crazy that every guy looked exactly the same because they all had big bushy beards. And Cain and Abel, to me, were young. So I would cast two younger guys so that they didn't have beards. So I'm thinking as Abel, Tom Holland, because Tom Holland would make a great innocent guy. As Cain, though, that's a tough one. See, I'm trying to think of Cain. Who would be a good evil brother to Tom Holland? Who's the kid that played Malfoy in Harry Potter? Someone like that. And there's your Cain. So granted, I'm sure he's too old now, but that's who I would want. Someone who looked like that. Man, speaking of that herb, I sure wish I could get some here today. Man, I wish I was in Illinois right now. All right. But that's an interesting question there, Alex. Some people say the technology hasn't made humanity worse off. I tend to believe the technology just brings out what has always been there, nothing new under the sun. I agree, Tristan. And in fact, and Random Menace says, I was addicted to super chatting. Fortunately, I'm healed now. Actually, I will tell you this, Joseph. That's one of the few addictions that doctors say is completely healthy, and in fact, makes you a better person. So that's an addiction that you should feed, especially, and the doctors say, especially if your super chatting goes to people that have sodium products in their name. I don't know why. That's just, I mean, I don't know what that has to do with anything, but just so you know, that's 100% true. I saw a study. Yeah. Justin says about nothing new under the sun, or that what technology does bring it out. It does. I think what the internet does is show what true human nature is. Yes, Alex. Hayden Christensen as Abel, or as Cain. I could see Hayden Christensen as Cain. That could work. But yeah, if you look at the internet comments or Twitter, stuff like that, you can see, like, when people just put out that kind of raw hatred, that hatred wasn't brought on by the internet. That hatred is just exposed by the internet. That's people being themselves. That's people showing what they really are. And what they're doing is they're just saying, yep, this is what I've been all along. I just was covering it up by the pleasantries of society. And that's the scary thing to me, is that people have been constantly hiding that level of vitriol and hatred. And, you know, the internet is just exposing it. And so people that want to say, oh, humanity is this wonderful flower and all that. No. Nope. But we should try to be that wonderful flower and being kind and loving and all that. But yeah, let's not pretend that people are wonderful and loving and kind and all that all the time, because most people are complete and utter jerks. Alex says, on a base I worked at, the gas station sold like 3 snacks but had 5 aisles of alcohol that you could go through to get to the milk. Is that taking advantage of alcoholics in your opinion? Not necessarily. It could just be that's I mean, like, on a military base, if alcohol sells a lot, then you're just taking care of your clientele. A business, their job is to provide the products that people want to buy. And Indie Tiger and Yosef feeding the addiction. Thank you both. Oh, Lordy. I'm going to get in so much trouble for this. There's going to be a special place in hell for me now. Oh, man. Am I going to get in trouble? Huh? Am I going to get in trouble, little girl?
You're traveling through the desert on a horse with no name. There's a signpost up ahead. It says, the Twilight Zone.
Here, just for you,
But
Indie Tiger.
you bite into some orange
You want to say hi to Indie Tiger?
cheese balls.
He's right there,
And
right
your
in the
tongue
camera. You want to
jumps
look in
out
the
of your
camera
throat.
for him? Wow.
It's replaced
You're
by
so
the
mean.
fire of 1 billion burning suns. and you've realized
She's like, let me get back
you've
to my
taken a
bed.
turn to the turd zone.
Thank you, Bird.
Addicted to giving away money. Here, have some money.
He who controls the spice controls the universe.
Since you said it, it must be the truth. Sodium chloride forever.
Wow, it actually got that. Wow. Did you catch that? Nice.
Why did I not hate the prequels before I saw RLM?
So, so one thing at a time. First of all, Tobey Maguire is Cain, Tom Holland is Abel, Revenge of the Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire, I think, he's too nice to be Cain. Sorry. Indie Tiger, thank you so much. I do truly appreciate it, my friend. Yosef, I thank you again, and I'm impressed though that the automated voice got that was sodium chloride. So, but thank you. And Alex says, why did I not hate the prequels before I saw RLM? What is RLM? Oh, Red Letter Media. Thank you for clarifying. Probably because you just thought they were fun, and then Red Letter Media poked a bunch of holes and showed you some of the problems with it, which, that's true. Red Letter Media did a good job of showing a lot of the problems with the prequels, but I still don't hate the prequels. I think that the prequels are problematic, but that doesn't change the fact that I find them enjoyable. So I think that I think that you need to that's it. Just depends. Like if you listen to an opinion and you are convinced that opinion is correct, then it can change your opinion of something else. BK says going for a comedy shot with the Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland. Gotcha. And Mr. Plinkett. I'll tell you, the Mr. Plinkett reviews, they are funny. But the problem, and this is something that I've been wrestling with, I'll be honest with you guys. Thinking about what am I going to do with the YouTube channel once we move and we get settled into the new house, which I know that we're talking about months down the road right now, but it's going to happen. And when that happens, what are the priorities going to be? Because when that happens, do we, the problem is that YouTube has just become full of comedic reviewers. And so, Mr. Plinkett was the grandfather of a lot of these characters, but now we have people like the Critical Drinker, and others of his ilk that basically make reviews that are, number one, their first priority is to be entertainment. Number two is to be an informative review. And sometimes the reviews are informative and sometimes they're just funny. And I don't particularly like this trend. Just being honest about it, because I don't like the idea that reviews are purely entertainment. If reviews are purely entertainment, if reviews are just another form of media that we watch to be entertained, then people will try to make their reviews more and more wild, so that we'll watch them. And that's why Critical Drinker, he does a great job. Critical Drinker is just Mr. Plinkett 2.0, right? He's more prolific than Mr. Plinkett, and he has a better established character than Mr. Plinkett. And the problem becomes, well, what do you do if you're reviewing a movie and you have a choice between giving an honest appraisal and giving a funny appraisal? Which way do you go? You're going to end up giving the funny appraisal. And with Mr. Plinkett, okay, that was funny, but Mr. Plinkett was an unusual thing when he did the prequel reviews. He was not the norm. But now Mr. Plinkett, that's how people do reviews. Now, and the difference was that Mr. Plinkett was kind of a parody of movie critics. But now there are no movie critics left to parody. Now nobody cares about real movie critics. Now people think Jeremy Jahns is a real movie critic. And no, I'm sorry, Mahler is not decent. You see, the problem is that ripping apart movies is not criticism. And saying he gives unbridled praise to a lot of films. How many films has he given unbridled praise to? And by the way, he shouldn't be doing either unbridled praise or unbridled rage, which I know that's all he does. Well, he did do like one unbridled meh that I know of. But the problem there, Stan, is that that's not a review. Okay. Mahler, there's, and I have a problem with it. I do. What Mahler does is not a review. It is he's, don't get me wrong, he's entertainment. If your review of a movie is longer than the movie, that's not a review of the movie. That is its own work. It's not. Mahler is just an extended version of CinemaSins. Without, the difference is Mahler doesn't have a sin counter, and he likes to pontificate for unreasonable amounts of time on the minutia of some points. But so Mahler has this, and don't get me wrong, Mahler has got a wonderful voice. He's got that beautiful English accent. He's got the, a great vocabulary, and he can sit there and talk about the fact that a camera should have been positioned in a different way for 20 minutes and keep you engaged. And make it sound like it was the biggest mistake in the history of cinema, that they didn't shoot this particular scene in a different way, or that this one line wasn't said differently, or whatever. Yeah, and so to me, and good to see you, Jason, by the way. So I don't particularly enjoy that type of criticism, because to really appreciate Mahler, to appreciate Mahler, or to really appreciate Critical Drinker or any of these guys, you have to have seen the movie. Like, if I really want to appreciate a Mahler review, I will have to have already seen the movie. And CinemaSins, CinemaSins, again, is just another thing. Like, here's what me and my wife do, generally speaking. If we watch a movie, like say we're watching a movie on Netflix or on Hulu or something, then after the movie's done, we immediately go over to YouTube. We'll check to see if Jeremy Johns did a review of it, because we like Jeremy's personality. We'll see, hey, did he give it a good time, no alcohol required, or an awesome-tacular? Just curious to see what he thought of it. And then after Jeremy, we'll see, hey, did they do a how it should have ended? Did they do it? And then we'll see if they did a CinemaSins on it. You know, that's kind of our routine. But but we do all those things after we've watched the movie, because none of those things are good for now. And most of those, like, I'll say this, when it comes to CinemaSins or how it should have ended, or honest trailers, those types of things, they're not trying to convince you to see the movie or not to see the movie. Right? They're just making fun of things in the movie, and that's fine. That's great. And that's what they're there for. And they're great to watch immediately after watching the movie. But these so-called reviews that are as long as the movie itself, no thank you. And John Campea, sorry BK Dan, I will not watch John Campea. I find John Campea's content offensive. I truly find John Campea's content offensive. And so, when John Campea comes on and delivers a sincere apology to the American South, then maybe I'll watch his content. Which is never going to happen, of course. But yeah, John Campea is, and don't get me wrong, I don't hold a grudge against John Campea. I'm sure he's, maybe he's a nice guy, but, it's not like I'm, condemning him to hell or something, but I'm not going to watch his content until he decides to apologize for the way that he has treated the American South, because he was a complete and utter dick to the South. Not only that, but I also find it offensive that from day one on his channel, when he broke off from, I can't remember what they were called now, but with Schnepp and the guys, when he broke off from Collider and went on his own. And he just started off right off the bat where he was only going to read super chats. And at the time, I didn't even know what a super chat was. And I was like, what the heck is a super chat? How do I give him a super chat? And then I found out, a super chat is a chat that you pay for? Oh, heck no. I was done at that point. I was like, so he'll only read comments if you give him money. So, yeah, no thank you. And I'm sorry, look, so there are some people, like, for example, I'll say this for Critical Drinker. He was on last night. I only saw about 2 minutes of his live stream. He was reading people's comments. All right, so props to Critical Drinker. He was reading super chats and he was reading regular comments. Absolutely props to Critical Drinker. And he had 5,000 people on his stream. So, I may not always appreciate his style, but I absolutely respect him. I've never seen any of his live stream stuff before. But just from the couple of minutes I saw, my level of respect for him shot through the roof. However, John Campea, the fact that every time he talks about the South, at least I haven't watched him in a long time, so I don't know if he still does this or not. But in the past, every time he would talk about the South, he would refer to them as cousin humpers, and stuff like that. So, yeah, he was doing his James Bond review when I flipped by. But by the time I caught, it was after the question of Trek had wrapped up, and by the time I dropped by, he'd already, I'd assume, finished talking about the movie, because they were just talking about random stuff. He was like an hour or so into his live stream. But he was reading the super chats as they came in, and he was reading regular chats. And Stan, I don't care, and this is another problem. I don't care if he's a published author. I don't care. Anybody can be a published author these days. You do know that, right? Anybody can be a published author these days. That means nothing to me. And, honestly, look, Darren Wagner is a published author. Does that make, now granted, Darren Wagner is a really smart guy. And I'm not dissing Darren Wagner by saying that. Alex Leeds, Dr. Alex, he's a published author, multiple books, right? There are plenty of published authors in the nerd community. That doesn't make them a great, brilliant YouTuber. Alex says, when you get to 500K subscribers, can you promise not to read just Super Chats? Alex, I made that pledge the minute I started this channel. I absolutely made that pledge. The day I started this channel, I said, I will, and I hold to that pledge, I will never, ever, ever get to a point where I only read Super Chats. I don't care if the chat's going 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I will still read regular chats at least as much as I read Super Chats. I may not be able to read all of them, but I will at least read some. I may, if the channel actually grew to some ridiculous proportion, I might have to get a producer that had to pick out stuff and say, hey, here's one from Alex Bogey, or whatever. But I'm not going to, I would never get to a point where I would just require people to pay me to answer a question. That's just, to me, that's ethically wrong. The other problem I have with John Campea is he's a shill, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean that in what the word actually means. He is too close to the people in Hollywood. He can't give an honest criticism of them. He rubs shoulders with the people in Hollywood that he supposedly criticizes. So, yeah. A lot of people are offended by people referring to California as California, or saying New York should be wiped off the map. Yeah? And you know what? I don't say those things. Lore Reloaded says mean things about Californians. I don't. And I don't think Lore should do that, but that's his gimmick. And I'm from California originally. And my mom is from Yonkers, New York. So, look, I know that it's easy. If you are a conservative, it's very easy to sit there and blame California and New York for your problems. If you're a liberal, it's very easy to blame the American South or Midwest for your problems. But the problem is that then you're ignoring people in your own states, because it's not a northwest, it's not a northeast southwest problem. It's a rural urban problem. And so what people don't realize is that California is actually the richest agricultural state in the country, and that most of California is very conservative. It's just LA and San Francisco that are liberal, but LA and San Francisco is also the bulk of the population of California. Most people don't realize Oregon is mostly very conservative, but Portland, Oregon is the most liberal city in this country. And Portland, Oregon has over half the population of the state. Same can be said for Washington State. Seattle, Washington, very liberal city, over half the population of the state, but Seattle, the state overall, very conservative. And so on. Now, you go to the American South, right? And so a state like Tennessee, well, Tennessee as a state goes red. It's a red state, right? It's a conservative state. But Nashville and Memphis are actually pretty liberal cities. However, those cities are small enough to where they're not half the population of Tennessee. So it's just the opposite. And so the reason, and just so you guys know, the reason that like people were freaking out about Georgia going the wrong way this last election, and people forget about Atlanta, you know, because they think, how could Georgia possibly go the other way? Atlanta, big city, and cities don't go for Republicans. It's not a South thing. It's an urban thing.
Controls the universe.
NY and Cali bring in the big dollar, gotta give me props.
So, yeah, but it's, and the thing is that, so New York and California just have a lot of electoral votes. That's why they get the attention from the Democrats. Not because those states are actually all that liberal. They're liberal because they have Los Angeles, San Francisco, and NYC. But they have the largest electoral votes. That's why you notice that the Democrats win the electoral vote race but they always, they bank on New York and California. And that's why, like when Reagan won, the reason that Ronald Reagan won big time was because he was from California. And so the Democrats had nothing, because if the Republicans win California or New York, the Democrats can't win. Anyway, well, I'm going to do something that I've never done for a Sunday morning live stream, because I'm just feeling weird today. Well, we'll have a little conversation. Now, we're not talking politics, just so you know. Definitely not talking vaccinations. So please don't even bring that one up. But we'll talk about the whole thing with, YouTube pundits and stuff like that, or whatever. Jason, if you want to come up, we can talk about that stuff, or Andy Tiger, and all you guys that don't go to church, you heathens, or what I'm going to do when I get to 500,000 subscribers, and I'm the ultimate power in the universe. It's funny when Laura calls the EU a real life dominion. That might be funny, but I think that Laura takes it a little far sometimes. I love Laura. He is a good friend of mine in real life, but I do think he takes things too far. I think that he is, but that's his shtick, and that's why he's got 100,000 subs, right? That's the problem. I'm too nice a guy. If I wasn't so nice, I'd probably already have 100,000 subs, but I'm a nice guy. That's kind of my problem. And hey, Alex.
Hey, Salty. I won't talk about politics.
Good. I don't want to get banned. That that would be good.
Do they check like for voices as well? I mean, I don't know what the software is like voice recognition. If you say a forbidden word.
Oh yeah. The Google will know. If you start talking about it, they will know, and that's because that's one of the reasons that if you turn on subtitles, you can actually see what you're saying right there on the live stream.
Yep. I liked it when Laura calls the EU the real life dominion. I get a kick out of that. It really makes the European viewers angry.
Yeah. Well, you were mentioning in the chat that some Oregon counties want to break off and join Idaho. There was actually a movement for a long time in southern Oregon and northern California to create an independent state of Jefferson. But the problem is that it would never work, because one thing that every state has is at least one city. And Jefferson State would have no city.
What is it? Redstone or something there? No, not Redstone, but it starts with an R. Radcliffe? Sorry, but there is a city in there.
Well, there's not a significant city.
Let me Google it. What would be the capital of Jefferson? But yeah, you're right. It's like the size of Savannah at the most.
Right. There's nothing there. There's nothing. And Jason says can't join. Too bad, Jason. I'd love to have you on.
Yeah,
maybe this afternoon, Jason. Maybe this afternoon. Let's see. Well, Indy, if this is the close thing, come on up. Come on, Indy. You can come on.
Eureka would be the capital, which is only 87,000 people. So, yeah, that wouldn't work.
But, the funny thing, though, is that if they did have a big city, then they wouldn't be the state of Jefferson.
True.
And
yeah, when I go to Atlanta, I see Democrat signs everywhere, so I'm not surprised they voted 80% for Biden at all. So.
Right. Well, it's if you look at the breakdown, I mean, city, it actually makes perfect sense. I know people get freaked out about it, and they but I didn't know you were hosting it.
It would be great if you did like countdowns like some of the other streamers do, like a half an hour notification.
So the what was I going to say?
Yeah, you were saying that.
As far as the liberal conservative breakdown of city rural, it actually makes perfect sense, because if one of the defining characteristics of liberalism is it's a soft form of collectivism, right? So that people believe, at its core, the idea is that people working together for a common goal, as opposed to at the core of conservatism, the common idea would be individualism, that people work independently towards their goals. And that's like the fundamental difference between in the United States of liberals and conservatives. Liberals believe that we should all be working together for a common goal. That's why they tend to believe in pooling our money together in the form of more taxes, in having more government programs to work together, to have more city services, stuff like that. Whereas conservatives believe the opposite, that we should have less taxes, that we should have less programs, that we should have everything be as independent as possible. And hey, Indy. So why does this make perfect sense? Because if you live in the country, you have no choice but to live independently. If you live in the country, you don't have a police department that's patrolling your area every 5 minutes. You got a sheriff that's a half an hour away at best.
Got to have your own gun.
Right.
Yeah.
If you
there's actually a county in Virginia where I live that is they clearly state that if you move into the county, you can't expect emergency services to be at your door in 20 minutes. You have to recognize that if you're living next to a farm, there's going to be foul odors and loud noises early in the morning, and you just have to live with it.
Right. So but on the flip side, if you live in a city, you have to expect that if you are not living for the common good, then you are going to be at war. Right? Because you are forced to work together because everybody is condensed into one area. If you're not working together, you're dying together.
Well,
and so it's not, I don't think liberalism and conservatism, as far as the way we see it in the United States, is just a simple result of, those people are good and those people are bad. I think it's because it's a necessity, if you're in a city, for you to be somewhat liberal by the American standards. And if you live in the country, it's an absolute necessity that you be somewhat conservative.
Well, strangely enough, I used to be a liberal before I moved to a big city. Granted, it was Moscow, Russia, but it's comparable to New York by size. But I had some personal relationship problems, and I ended up with no money to pay rent for a few weeks, and I had to forego food, and that completely changed me. I had like conversion, you could say. I understood that I have to stand up for myself. No one's coming to save me. I got to take responsibility for my own life, and that kind of led me down the conservative path, going back to church, and all that. So I think liberalism in a city is possible as long as the system keeps supporting you. But if the system throws you to the curb, then you will become a conservative, because the city is being uncaring.
Right. Johnny points out there are other core principles. There are, but this is where I think this is why the great divide is over these. I think that what pushes people towards liberalism and conservatism is independence versus collectivist thinking. Now, the things like religious beliefs and superfluous issues like pro-life, pro-choice, stuff like that does come into play as well. But what's interesting is people can cross those lines, because let me talk to you guys for a second about something. I'm gonna get a little uncomfortable for a second for some people, but I'm going to talk about the black community in this country. All right, the black community in this country votes overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party. But they are also, by every measurable metric, very conservative.
Yeah, I think there's. Oh, sorry,
They're
mentioned.
Yeah, they're one of the most conservative groups in this country. And so if you look at from religion, you look at abortion, you look at every social thing except for the collectivism part. Because blacks do tend to live overwhelmingly in our urban areas. They do tend to be dependent upon our social systems. But in every other regard, they are extremely conservative.
Yeah, wasn't there some proposition in Cali to ban gay marriage, and it was supported by the black communities mostly? Proposition 8,
right.
Something.
And so what happens? And so it's not that people can't, it can't be convinced to cross that line.
Yeah.
And
they're just scared by the monsters on the other side.
Well, but you see, I think it's because the independence versus dependence overrides everything else.
Yeah. The problem with that is that the cities are the most vulnerable places for failure.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you got to make rent. What if your roommate gets sick? That happened to me as well many times.
Hang on a second. I got to answer my brother here.
I'll just slap him.
See?
He's not here. I just have to text him.
I'll virtually slap him.
This is why I try to make the argument that like liberalism is a quasi-religion, because you kind of have to adhere to those values to have a high-paying job, especially in places like LA. If you want to make it in Hollywood, you there's only like one Clint Eastwood for 100 woke.
Well, you could argue that any ideology is a quasi-religion.
Well, it happens naturally, though. People, there's no like someone preaching in the countryside to say, depend on yourself. We don't need no government. You don't need that. People know that already.
Yeah, and then again, and again on the opposites.
All the time through the liberals. Sorry.
On the opposite side of the coin, they can't take care of themselves in the cities because they can't grow food. They can't put out their fires that are in these high-rise buildings. They can't.
They don't realize that. Exactly.
Yeah, interdependence in an urban environment is a necessity. It's not just a choice. It's not that, well, people in the city just want social programs. They are necessary because, you can't just plant a garden and grow your own food, and you can't raise livestock and get your own meat or your own milk or raise your own eggs. In most cities, it's not even legal to have chickens, right? So you have to. You have to work within the confines of where you live. But if you live out in the country, like when I was a kid, I grew up on a ranch. And so, when I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I was gathering the eggs and feeding the chickens and feeding the sheep and all that. But we never bought eggs at the grocery store, right? That wasn't a problem. So the fact that if my dad's paycheck wasn't particularly thick, well, we always had eggs,
Yeah, where I used to live in Moscow, whenever someone fell in hard times, their family from the countryside would help them, maybe send them some money, or if it gets bad enough, they would just go and live back in their village for a year before trying again, because there's no social safety net there. It's sink or swim. So that's how I imagine it could be here, but it's probably too late to turn the clock back, as we've already talked about.
So Stan Lee says he tried growing his own vegetables. By fall, he had enough to make one salad. I think that I think you weren't growing enough.
Yeah, people are too disconnected from where the food comes from in the cities. I agree.
But yeah, it's and I'll tell you, I do not have a green thumb. I can raise livestock. Well, not now, but I could. Back in the past, I could do livestock all day long, but give me a garden and I'll give you some dead plants.
Wow.
Yeah.
Again, in Europe, lots of people have like a summer cottage place where they grow potatoes and corn in the summer, and that really helps during economic recessions.
Yeah, there's some subdivisions in the United States that have land set aside for individual gardens.
Yeah, there's some people in Savannah here who have like little grapefruit plantations on the islands, not in the city itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's definitely an irreversible process, because you kind of have to adhere to the liberal ideology to remain in the city.
Right. At the very least, you have to have a collectivist attitude in a city, and cities are kind of a necessity in order for the country to function.
Well, not anymore. Now that we have all manufacturing in Southeast Asia.
Well, you're assuming that that's sustainable forever.
Yeah. It's hard to tell, but they certainly do have the population.
Well, yeah, but we don't want that to remain that way forever. We don't, I know right now Americans think that things are great, but the longer all the manufacturing stays overseas, the worse it's going to be for us eventually.
That's the reason why the man we can't talk about put up the tariffs for China, even though that goes against free trade, because people are hoping that the jobs will come back. I mean, he literally said in Pittsburgh, "I'll bring back steel." So, because there used to be lots of middle-class jobs you could get without going to college, and getting into debt, you could just go work in a factory and make 50 grand and have a family.
Yeah, make a decent living. Yeah, as you're building cars and
Hey, you can build cars here in Tennessee.
iron to steel. Yeah.
Nissan's got a big old plant right here in Middle Tennessee,
Yeah,
and
I moved to the South.
and Ford is actually looking at building a plant here now.
Yeah.
Good. That's why I moved to a formerly red state, Georgia. I figured I have a better chance of buying a home here, which is true. I was able to buy it for 70 grand. There's nothing in Colorado for 70 grand other than a cabin in the woods.
Well, I don't think I want to move to a cabin in the woods. I'm not quite the Unabomber. I may look like the Unabomber, but no.
I don't think anybody would mistake you for the Unabomber.
If I let my hair down, they might.
But yeah, if you ever watch Tim Pool, he always has these predictions of that the country's going to fall apart. There's going to be soft secessions. New Hampshire is going to secede. Texas is going to secede.
First of all, we don't need to talk about Tim Pool here because I'm trying not to get my channel in trouble.
Is he in trouble for something?
When you start talking about all these conservative channels and stuff, and guess what happens? I get flagged as one of them.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought he was pretty neutral because he's
You thought Tim Pool was considered neutral?
He's for universal health care, like you are. That's a pretty center-left position, maybe. He agrees we should have welfare. He is for protectionism, which is kind of a liberal thing. No?
I've never heard anyone say Tim Pool was liberal.
Well, here's me saying it. One vote the other way. But then again, I am conservative, so he'll seem liberal to me. So
well, I don't watch his channel personally because I'm an anti-ideologist, and I don't watch people who are ideologists.
All right. I would disagree that he is, but I'm not going to argue about it.
Well, you know what? Anybody who's got a political channel is an ideologist, and that's why I don't have a political channel. I don't want to sit there and rant about politics all day long because even though I find them interesting, it would be exhausting to try and keep up with all the politics going on. I don't want to.
I'm almost a local politician now since I got involved, and I really hate having to keep up with the news.
It's too much.
It's a big burden to carry.
It really is. Yeah, I've started to get involved in my community too since I moved, and it's like, holy crap! How many emails do I have to go through every day?
I look up my phone, there's like 200 messages there. And even if you unplug, you're gonna get your buddies asking you, "What do you think about this and that?" And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I get stopped in the street by our HOA president because he's
But the problem is, if you don't get involved, you're going to have other people making decisions for you. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be something you approve of.
And that's why I am involved because, our community is a planned community, but it has never been fully developed. And now the developers are the grandsons of the original developer. And they're taking things in a direction that a lot of people just don't like. We have a little village here and they want to turn it into a mini city. And it's like,
guys, it's the fourth layer of government, as though federal, states, and city wasn't enough. We've got to have the HOA level of government now too. So. That's one of the things to accept that most people don't want freedom.
HOAs are a double-edged sword because on the one hand, you don't want people growing corn in their front yard necessarily. But on the other hand, you don't want the HOA overreaching and telling you what to paint your front door, what color to paint your front door, or what color to paint your house.
I would love for my neighbors to grow food. Why not? But then again,
I gotta disagree with you on that, Indy. I think the HOAs are from the pit of hell. Now I know you don't believe in hell, but I still think they're from the pit of hell because I do not believe in having my neighbors decide what I can and cannot do with the land that I own. I understand that you have to fall within whatever the regulation that the city or the state have set. as far as zoning requirements and stuff like that. But beyond that, if I want to plant a garden on my property and that's legal in my state and my city, then I have the right to do it. I don't give a crap if my neighbor likes it or not. Now, or if I want to put a swimming pool in my backyard and that's legal and I got the right permits and whatever, then my neighbor doesn't get a say in that.
So I agree with you for the most part, but I have a question. Are you living in a single family home, a townhome?
I live in a single family home.
Okay, so DC is mostly, if you can afford it, you can afford a townhome.
Right. And I get that that's a little different.
That's a bit different. And that's where you get the overreach from the HOA, but you also get the rules that say you can't grow corn in your front yard, and people have tried to grow corn in their front yard. Or you can't have trash in your backyard. You know, where in my last neighborhood, there was somebody who had a bunch of junk metal in his backyard. And it was fenced, so you couldn't really see it. But he's not supposed to have all that scrap metal. His whole backyard was covered in scrap metal.
Yeah. Well, that's also why while I have considered it out of necessity, I could not bring myself to living in an apartment as far as purchasing, which I know it's a townhome, whatever you want to call it, it's an apartment. Just because it doesn't have a unit on top of you, it's an apartment. And because you have a common wall, I presume, with your neighbor, correct?
I did, yeah. In my last name, yeah, I do actually in my condo, yes. Yeah. And I did I had one common wall with my neighbor in my last townhouse.
Right. And like it would, because like, for example, now T'Pring is a very quiet dog, but she's just a puppy. My wife's dog, Puka, when we come home, she makes a racket, right? And she is just a noisy little thing. And so I don't want to be an annoyance to my neighbor. And I know that if we had a common wall with someone, that there is no way they would not hear her, right? So if we were out late one night, because let's just say we decided to go out on a date night and see a movie when Spider-Man comes out or something, and we don't get home until 11:30, 12 o'clock, and our neighbors are in bed, and then all of a sudden, yep, for 20 minutes when we get home, they're going to get mad. And rightfully so, because if they came home late at night and I was in bed and I heard that, I would get mad. And so that's why I don't like that kind of a living situation. And that's why I do not want to live in a city like DC. I am more of the, because I grew up on a ranch, so I prefer more out in the country than in the city. I'll live in the city if I have to, but I much prefer small town to country living.
And like I say, I don't live in DC directly because I couldn't afford to live in DC directly. If I did, it would be a crappy little 1-bedroom. But I do live in DC, in a DC neighborhood. It's considered DC.
I'm sorry.
And my favorite Australian,
the
Fed doc, I don't know if you see in the chat, said common walls with neighbors are a pain, especially when they're loud in a way that's not exactly proper, if you catch my meaning.
No, not at all, Fed doc. We don't understand that at all.
Yeah, I went to DC in November and December of last year. So on the 14th, I just slept in my car. Then on Hanukkah, I got a hotel room for about $60.
And Robert, I am not ignoring the chat, but most of you are not pointing at Salty Trekker. So if you don't put at Salty Trekker, I don't know that it's addressed to me. So suck on that.
Good fences make good neighbors. That's what I'd say to the Fed duck.
Yeah.
As Robert Frost said.
Sure. That's what.
And save me from innate blabberings about the footy. What's the footy? Do you know what the footy is? I don't speak Australian.
Yeah, I thought foodie was like a food enthusiast, but
No idea.
All
but
right.
I guess it has more than one meaning. Do either one of you listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History or Common Sense channel that he used to have? No.
No, never heard of him.
He brought up a good point. He was always trying to be neutral, and he said, like, well, what's the end goal? Even if you think like the other half of Americans are your enemy, and even if you do defeat them, what are you going to do about all their literature? The next generation is just going to grow up reading it. Anyway, there is no way to win this culture war. You got to stop hating on each other, but obviously they didn't, so he stopped his show eventually. But
Well, the problem is that we're all obsessing over defeating an ideology. You cannot defeat an ideology.
that's a thankless task.
You know, the only thing you can do is try to convince people that their ideology is incorrect, which is also a very difficult thing to do because most people, they don't think they're holding an ideology. They just think, well, that's just the way it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then
The red
people
pill
don't
all
stop
about-
to think about the fact, like what we were talking about a minute ago, that the most deeply held core parts of like an American liberalism and conservatism has nothing to do with your religion or your race or any of that stuff. It's about where you live. It's the fact that if you're in the city, like obviously where Indy lives, being something of a collectivist is an absolute necessity. He has to deal with an HOA because of where he lives, right? I would, I sit there and I can sit there and say I would never deal with an HOA, but I live in a single family home out in the country. I got an acre sized property. And so it's a very different situation because of where I live.
I tolerate living in a city just because the beach is 20 minutes away, so I can always go to the beach when I get salty.
And you say the footy is the rugby. Gotcha. So that's a nickname for rugby. Got it.
That's clever, actually.
Thank you, Fed. But we need to stop trying to think that they're bad because they're liberal or they're bad because they're conservative and realize that a lot of them are just liberal because they live in the city. A lot of them are conservative because they live in the country. So when we stop fighting over that and just try to figure out, okay, is there a way to make the system work for people in the city and people in the country? And that's the real rub. And that's where it's difficult because what happens is that where people start screaming how things are unfair.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's the biggest problem with universal income is that people will scream that you're putting them on welfare instead of looking at the reality that we don't really need everyone to work full time anymore with our technology. We can afford to have the population be on universal income, and
well, I don't know about that.
Conservatives will get pissed off about that.
But
Well, universal income is basically paying back part of your taxes to you. So you're paying more in taxes to get some of that money back. I'm not sure that is a sustainable method of paying people.
Well, I mean, it's mostly the rich paying the taxes right now. Poor people don't really pay much in taxes, at least from the federal level. Of course, in sales, they pay other places. But
The problem
it wouldn't really be that much different from the wasteful system we have now. Like if universal income could replace some of the other welfare programs, that it could be a better system.
I think paying less in taxes.
Adding it onto it, it's not going to work. I agree with you there.
Honestly, I think that the conservatives should make their message. Listen, who can spend your money better, you or the government?
Yeah, I agree.
Because people will honestly say they can spend their money. They know where their money needs to go more than the government needs to know where their money needs to go. And the rich, unfortunately, if you tax the rich too much, they're the most mobile people So they can go live in Costa Rica and still have their business and still make all the money that they want to make.
Yeah, I remember the Panama Papers scandal. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not paying the taxes that suddenly the United States wants to impose on them.
Well, the problem is they're not paying the same kind of taxes anyway. Like a lot of people worry about income taxes, but most of the rich aren't paying income tax, right? They pay
because they don't take
they
it.
pay capital gains tax mostly.
Inheritance tax. Yeah, that's pretty big.
But we also, I mean, as far as things like universal income, I don't think that a universal income is the answer to things. I do think that what we should do is look at restructuring whatever welfare programs we have to make them so that they make more sense. The way that they're set up now is, kind of jacked up, and like our disability system is messed up in that right now, like people who are completely disabled, but they don't have enough work credits in, can't get any kind of benefit, right? Like my son is considered totally disabled by the system, but he's never worked because he was totally disabled before he entered into the workforce. His maximum benefit from the United States government is like $700 a month plus health care. Yeah. And so let's say that lightning strikes and me and my wife are dead tomorrow. How is he supposed to survive on $700 a month?
Would you get some SSI benefits and that survivor's income from Social Security?
No, because I'm only 53, so he's not going to get any kind of real survival benefits from me until until my age is 65 or whatever.
That makes no sense because by the time you're 65, if he had been able, he would have been able to make his own income by the time you're retired. So.
And yes, Fed, our system is very inflexible and it's extremely inefficient, to say the least. But yeah,
the fine line here I definitely see was the way the system is unsustainable. You're going to have people leaving the cities.
Right.
Like we've seen it happening with New York and Cali.
Now, right. I don't think that a person should be an able-bodied person should not be able to make a career out of welfare. Unless and honestly, I think that as far as an able-bodied person, it's actually very simple. If an able-bodied person is out of work and they want to apply for benefits, you say, sure, here's a living wage and here's some tools. I need you to start cleaning toilets in the courthouse, please. Yeah. And they'll be like, but wait a minute, I got kids. Great. Daycare center is right over there. Drop them off. And they'll be like, but, oh, don't worry. You see that person getting welfare over there? They're going to the daycare center to work. You know, I have no problem with, if somebody wants benefits from the government, no problem, but you put them to work.
The problem is we never really have meetings of the mind. It always gets tribal around election season and you're just demonizing.
Right. What we do is we turn it all into a battle that you're trying to, like, they'll say, oh, you want slave labor. It's like, no, they're getting paid. And I say pay them a decent wage, right? Pay them what they need.
So Stan Lee, how much do you think the military spending should be cut back in order to?
You can't cut enough military spending to make it up.
You can we could close our bases in Europe, but that would still be like $100 billion, probably not much more than that.
And we wouldn't have those forward bases to keep track of things that are going on in areas that are not friendly to the U.S.
Well, I'm an isolationist, so I have my biases. I definitely don't want us to be the world police. I think, if anything, Afghanistan has shown us the folly of that, and I brought that up 20 years ago, and that's why I stopped watching Enterprise, because they took the other side on it, and I think we got enough of our own problems we got to deal with before we start telling other people how to live. I mean, we were in Afghanistan. We were spending money on gender equality education there. I mean, come on. Teach them engineering and mining to get their lithium deposits first before you try to indoctrinate the poor Afghans.
All right, so Stanley was saying he wants to cut the entire military budget. That would be $622.6 billion.
And
which would not be enough, by the way. Just so you know. That would not, that still would not balance the budget.
It's kind of tricky because the VA budget is separate from the DOD.
Right, but I'm saying if you cut the entire Department of Defense, that'd be 620. And by the way, that would leave the United States defenseless, but that still would not balance the budget.
Yeah. No, the mandatory welfare spending on the big three, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security is like 70% of the budget. So.
But those programs need to be completely revamped. I think that, and the problem is nobody wants to touch them for good reason. I mean, nobody wants to touch them because they're sacred cows.
Yeah, Bush Jr. tried to do it, but
and everybody wanted to crucify him.
They've tried to go welfare to work. I forget who it was under. It was
Clinton actually tried to do it.
Well,
yeah.
Considering that the GOP couldn't even repeal Obamacare, I mean, are they really going to go after the bigger programs?
No.
But the problem is what we need, and this is where we run into trouble, is that what we honestly need is for the Democrats and Republicans to get off their collective asses, sit down at the table, work together to revamp these programs instead of to constantly try to villainize the other guys. And they're not willing to do that. What they want to do is come up with a reason why their program is good and the other guy's program is bad.
Yeah, I gotta give props to Bernie Sanders. Like you said, President Orange Man, let's fix Obamacare together. We both know there are problems with it.
Yeah.
And Fed, you're right. A lot of people think that throwing money at the problem is the solution. I'm not suggesting we just throw more money at the issue. I'm just saying that, like, when people say cut military spending to balance the budget, that if you look at the actual numbers, cutting the military to zero would not balance the budget. In all honesty, the budget ain't going to get balanced until that we restructure the entire federal government.
Yeah.
And we're not going to restructure the entire federal government until the political parties are willing to sit down and actually work together as reasonable human beings and say, okay, let's look at how can we actually make this work. Not how can we make my version work better than your version, but how can you and I sit down and come up with a plan that works for both the people that live in the cities and the people that live in the country. And so, hey, Mr. Republican, make sure we don't forget about Farmer Joe. And Mr. Democrat, make sure we don't forget about City Joe. And let's figure out how we're going to make this work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the elections themselves kind of force, like right now we got the Georgia governor primaries going on, and each of the candidates accusing the others of being too Democrat, not conservative enough. So obviously anyone who tries to have a meeting of the minds is going to be called a rhino and a fake Republican. So they kind of have to keep their base happy. They'll be seen as selling them out by whoever's running against them. They'll tell them, hey, he's a sellout. He's not a real conservative. Or same on the other side, probably. If he talks to the Republicans, he's
right. They're going to do no true Scotsman and stuff and all that.
Right now, for having a different opinion from the other Democrats, I kind of like him.
Salty Alex, I have to leave.
No, you're not allowed to leave, Indy. Sorry.
I got to go pick up my brother for breakfast.
Oh, what's your brother's problem?
Well, he comes here so often, so every once in a while he wants me to go there and pick him up and try.
Tell him that you're live streaming right now.
Hell, have him pick an Uber.
Or- he can't afford an Uber. He's one of those guys who's just barely making it.
Maybe he needs to.
Well, tell him to get his government check and, you know, and then get an Uber. It's the third. He got paid 2 days ago.
Anyway, I gotta go, guys. Thanks for the conversation.
Have a good one.
Jeffrey H. One last thing, Jeffrey H. The carbon tax. I don't know that that's going to work either, because for years we've had this in civil engineering wetland credits. Who's going to track the carbon tax the same way? Because I don't know that anybody's tracking wetland credits. When you don't have enough wetlands to service your site, you can buy credits from somebody else. But who's tracking that? I don't know if
new
anybody
taxes
is.
aren't going to fix anything anyway.
All right, guys. See you later. Thanks.
All right, Indy.
Bye.
Well, that's one thing about this whole budget bill being at an impasse and the debt ceiling. It's an opportunity to have some real good discussions. I hope they do happen, but I've seen this so many times that I'm not optimistic.
And Fed, you say, let the man feed his brother, but, you know, I don't want to just be talking to Alex. I need more people up here. But nobody's coming on. You know, Professor Brainy Specs is doing his laundry, so he won't come on.
Come on, someone else, come on, please.
Nobody else comes on. I'm going to have to end the live stream, and then, you know, then Alex is going to start crying.
Yeah.
But
real men never cry.
Anyway, but yeah, to go back on, as far as taxing carbon, or like people say, oh, you know, cut spending here, make the rich pay their fair share. It's not about just cash. It's not, you know, if it were, then, you know, it sounds wonderful. We just say, hey, tax these guys more, and all of a sudden we get more money. I'm sorry, but it's not, that's not the answer. And if you want to say, okay, so you're saying we need to end fossil fuel industry carbon emissions or we will all burn. All right, then here's the problem. If you truly believe that, if you think that fossil fuel and I will say this 100%, if you believe that fossil fuel emissions are going to destroy this planet, and I know there are people that genuinely believe that, then carbon tax is the most BS, wussed out, stupid answer to that I can possibly think of. You know what you need to do? Ban the internal combustion engine. Ban any type of fossil fuels, period. Ban the manufacture of anything that produces particulate matter that goes into the atmosphere, period. If you really are serious about this, then stop pussyfooting around with carbon tax and just say, no, it is illegal to...
By 2030, General Motors promises to only make electric vehicles.
Well, that's great. Well, some companies are going to do it on their own anyway. But I'm just, like, I know Ford is introducing the electric F-150, and you know, a couple of companies are putting out more electric cars, which is great. Don't get me wrong. If they can put out the range, the big problem with electric cars right now is just their limited range.
Yeah, it's like a cell phone on wheels.
But if they can fix the range issue, I would buy an electric car right now. But
our problems are much deeper than that.
Obviously. Right. But a tax on carbon, that is, you know what that does? All that does is affect the people at the bottom. It does not hurt the companies. It does not hurt the rich people that you think are going to pay those taxes, because guess who's going to pay the taxes? You and I.
All those people in the chat calling for more taxes, I'm curious what percentage of your income you paid in taxes last year.
You know, I'm sorry, but, you know, you and I are going to pay those taxes. You know, what they'll do is you'll say, oh, you're going to pay carbon tax. And so they say, okay, great, we're going to raise our prices.
I already see it. I spent $200 on groceries yesterday. I usually spend $100 per
And Professor Brady Specs is saying, you know nothing of the climate, and neither do most people screaming climate change. I'm not sure who you're talking, if you're talking about me, or you're talking about but so I'm not sure. Fed says, major problem is people forget that people are self-serving, always more interested in the affairs of them and theirs opposed to the collective, and that's perfectly all right. Well, I don't think that's perfectly all right. I think that we do need to start thinking about the bigger picture. If and the funny thing is, like, people, it's just like when people were talking, I was so against hybrid cars. People are like, oh, get a hybrid. It's like, why? If you're driving towards a cliff at 90 miles an hour, how does it make more sense to drive towards the cliff at 45 miles per hour? Because that's all a hybrid is. You're driving towards the same cliff at half the speed. That's all you're doing.
I think this is what the green leftists have in common with Christians. The apocalypticism ideas. They think that the world is going to end because of carbon emissions, while we think it'll end because Jesus will return. It's kind of a similar idea.
Well, I don't think that's similar, because I don't think Jesus... It's not like Jesus is emitting fossil fuels to wipe out the earth.
Yeah, but there's lots of Christians saying we're in the end days. I mean, there's
Well,
kind of a similar...
The problem with that is that people forget about what end times actually means. You know, we are in the end times, but you know when the end times started?
2,000 years ago?
Yes. With the day after the crucifixion, or actually the day after the Pentecost. That's when the end times began. When the end times began then, and they go until Jesus comes back. And so, but people think, oh, we're in the end times now, any minute now. But yeah, it could happen today, could happen in 10,000 years. But, you know.
Yeah, that's why I brought up that Mark quote a couple of weeks ago, that some of you will not see the kingdom of heaven.
Oh, yeah, when he says, yeah.
The apocalypse, not his.
And then the very next verse is when he shows them.
Yeah. Strangely enough, the professor I was watching failed to mention that.
And Stanley, that is a good point. The fossil fuels are used to charge the batteries. So if you do drive an electric car, when you plug in that electric car, if there's a coal burning plant that's charging that battery, that's just as bad, if not worse. However, if you have good, clean nuclear power, then, you know, that could help. All these schemes to fix things always seem to think people are going to do the right thing according to some person's view, completely forgetting that people think differently. That's true. And the environmental damage involved in disposing of dead batteries, a car with 2 engines more efficient and less wasteful than a car with 1 engine. They need to figure out how to isolate hydrogen. Well, isolating hydrogen is easy, but the problem is that, you know, hydrogen is kind of explosive. The climate change comment was directed to... Okay, just wasn't sure. And says, we can ban all fossil fuels overnight. It has to occur over... You can't ban it overnight. It has to occur over a period of time. The way we do it is with carbon tax. It starts relatively low and rises with time and incentivizes transition. And it hurts it hurts you. You see, that's the problem. You're hurting the common man with it. Don't do that. If you're gonna, you know, taxing the poor doesn't help. What you want to do is, if you want to ban it, that's fine, but you simply say, here's the rule. You're going to ban it. And I understand you can't do it overnight, so fine. You say, okay, 5 years from now, it's gone. As of December 31st, 2025, December 31st, 2025 is the last day you can have any kind of new vehicle produced with an internal combustion engine, period, right? So as of January 1st, 2026, all new cars have to have purely electric, or you can have hydrogen power if you can, or something like that, right? Alternative fuels. So that becomes number one. So you have to have alternative fuel vehicles January 1st, 2026. Number two, then you make it so that, okay, now all used vehicles that burn gas have to be phased out by a certain date. But you don't start taxing it, because if you start taxing it, what happens? All of a sudden, everybody starts paying more and more and more for gas. And what does that do? That makes it so that, mom and pa average trying to go to work are paying $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 a gallon for gas just trying to go to work. That's not right.
I'm the one who pays taxes, because no one in the group chat wants to say how much taxes they pay.
Fed says, fair go and trigger, but my point is people need to remember that to get people to do things your way, you need to incentivize positively, make it worth their while, time, and effort. True. Not easy.
Yeah, because people going galt because of what's the government is doing.
Anyone know how much taxes did you pay? When you say how much taxes did you pay, do you mean what kind of taxes? You mean
all of them together? Income, sales, property, just in the ballpark.
I didn't add it all up, but generally speaking, about half your income goes to taxes. If you include the hidden taxes that you pay, and of course things like gas tax and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, usually about half of your income ends up going to tax. Where are Mr. Fusions and flying cars? I would really like to know that. Green energy is highly dependent on fossil fuels. It's such a laugh. I think Matthew came up with the idea. I think you're right. I think green energy is so dependent on fossil fuels, it had to be a Matthew idea. Fed says, hydrogen, the Karogan's choice. Need I remind you, birds flirting around with the notion of zeppelins using hydrogen as opposed to helium to preserve helium. Yes, indeed.
Any taxes in Star Trek, as far as I know, I never heard any references to it.
Yeah, so I think that increasing taxes is never a good idea at this point. I think that trying to do carbon fees, carbon taxes, whatever you want to call them, is, and I'm sorry, I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce that name. I mean, JFFRYH. I don't know what that's supposed to be. But adding new fees and new taxes, all that does is hurt average people. All right, so that I'm going to throw that out of hand, because I don't want to hurt people in order to make things good for the environment. But what you need to do is simply tell the companies that are manufacturing vehicles that, look, this is the way it is. If you want to sell cars in the United States, these are the rules. And then you start looking at companies that produce a lot of pollution into the atmosphere. You say, this is the way it is. You want to continue to do business in the United States, you need to put atmospheric scrubbers on your smokestacks or whatever you call it, and you need to do it by this date, right? And then if they say, well, we're just going to move our manufacturing to China, then we need to say, you know what, that's great. And here's what the deal is. You want to export your stuff to the United States, you better clean it up in China.
Or pay 20% tariffs like they are right now.
I wouldn't even do that. And this is the problem. I think that we need to start, if we want to take environmentalism seriously, and I mean a serious environmentalism. I'm not talking about some crazed, university of oh gosh, now I'm forgetting Berkeley, California kind of environmentalism. I mean, like, if we want to seriously look at the environment and what's going on and how to deal with it, if we want to take a look at that seriously, then we need to look at these companies that have moved to places like China and are polluting I mean, look at what happened during the Beijing Olympics, right? They stopped the manufacturing in the area just before the Olympics, just so that the air would be breathable for the athletes, right? That's how bad it is. So
they've been wearing masks since then.
Right. So if if it's that bad over there, we need to start saying, okay, here's the deal. You want to export your stuff to the United States, you start cleaning up your act over there. And if you don't, we won't let you export to here. Period. Not tariffs, not taxes, not fees. You don't do business. Because if we just start saying tariffs, taxes, and fees, then they just increase their prices. And they just make mom, pa, average pay more. But if we say you can't do business, they will actually do something about it.
I agree. That's kind of why I like the former president, because he actually took on China.
You know, I'm sorry, but, you know, just if you're going to just add on extra fees, then guess what? Then that just means that you and I are going to pay extra.
Yep.
If you want to charge McDonald's $100 extra, then McDonald's just increases the price of a Big Mac by a dime. You know, that's the way that the world works. And so you want, and if you, and they don't care, they don't sweat it. You know, that's why, you know what made me sick the other day is I went to, you know, we went to get the family Jimmy John's. I don't know if you've ever had Jimmy John's sub sandwiches, right? And I like Jimmy John's. They're decent sub sandwiches. Not the greatest, but they're not bad. And so I bought a sub sandwich for me, my wife, and my son. My wife and my son got the combo, and then I got a chocolate chip cookie for me and my wife. $65. $65 freaking dollars for that. And I was like, what the heck has happened to this world? Where it's $65 for 3 sub sandwiches. And, you know, I was like, that's insane. That is freaking crazy. And
there's no tomorrow, Salty.
Right. So, no, I don't think that we should just freaking, you know, throw more fees on stuff. Because things have gone through the effing roof. And that needs to stop. Because we're already screwing people. And yes, Fed, we are definitely lacking spine in politics. That is true.
Who is it? Someone said Stan Lee said he paid $50 in taxes. Good for you, Stan. I appreciate it.
No, I think he was guessing how much the sandwiches were.
Oh, okay. Dang.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of a vicious cycle. You first give out stimulus money, and then you increase the taxes. You're just taking back the stimulus that you've just given to the people. It makes no sense if you think about it.
And Fed Doc says, "Sweet, merciful Christ, that's Aussie level prices." Yeah, I was shocked how much it was. I was like seriously wanting to go, can you take one of them sandwiches back? Because dang.
When I was in Germany, I spent 50 euros on cologne, so that's where we're headed. And that was a cheap one that at a pharmacy, not a brand name.
And you're right, Stan. Bacon would be extra. I'm glad I didn't ask for bacon. You know, I used to always say, yeah, give me double meat. And it's like, oh, yeah, that'd be $75. I mean, come on.
We got to stop the money printer.
I mean, for $65, I'd like the sandwiches should have like gold leaf wrapping or something. I mean, come on.
Yeah, how do we explain to the city folk that the money doesn't come from a cloud?
Right, and people think, you know, and the problem is, a big problem is that people do have this tendency to believe that businesses can just absorb any cost, right? They think that businesses have an endless pool of money that they can just don't worry about it. They'll just absorb the cost. You know, like Jeffrey was saying, oh yeah, we'll just throw a carbon fee on that. The businesses will pay the carbon fee. That's okay. And they don't stop to think about the fact that, you know, most restaurants, and I can tell you this from some experience. I spent a good chunk of my life as a restaurant manager. Most restaurants have a profit margin of 5% or less. And so you throw a carbon fee on a restaurant, and guess what? They will immediately have to raise prices. And so they raise their prices, and all of a sudden, okay, so now their sub sandwich goes from, say, $5 to $5.50, right? Because you put their carbon fee on there. Well, now everybody that goes to their sandwich place has to pay an extra 50 cents. Well, now people start complaining, oh, gee, my dollar doesn't go as far as it was. And so they demand they get a raise from their boss because cost of living has gone up. So now everybody has to pay their employees an extra buck an hour. But now, guess what? Their expenses have gone up. So now instead of $5.50, now they got to go to $6.50 for their subs.
And I talked with Bird of Prey about this. You probably heard about the strike that they're voting on in LA by all the Hollywood tech and grip workers because they're getting shortchanged and they're working crazy hours, but the cost of living has gone up so much that they can't afford to live in LA or near it anymore.
Right.
Even
It's
though they're
crazy.
working 12 hours and eating snacks at work instead of cooking.
Well, Stan, yeah, most new restaurants fail because, and it's not just when their loans are due. Because most places they have to start making payments on their loans right away if they took a loan out to open the restaurant, which they shouldn't do. But it's just basically depends on how deep their pockets are, you know. You should never ever go into debt to open a restaurant. If you are in debt when you open a restaurant, you are going to lose. That's what happened to Boston Market. For anybody that remembers Boston Market, I was actually a manager for them. And Boston Market, every Boston Market restaurant individually was profitable, and the entire restaurant chain failed. Why? Because they made the stupid mistake of going into debt.
They spent that much on marketing, I guess.
No, it wasn't marketing. It was debt. They just went in.
What?
All they did was they took out loans to open up more, because what happened was they opened up. They had the initial restaurant, Boston Chicken, and the investors saw this and they were like, "Wow, there's people lined up around the block to go to this place. Let's buy them out." So they bought them out. They got the recipe for their chicken, which was great. Let me tell you, their rotisserie chicken, was good. And so then they said, okay, we're going to change it to Boston Market, add a couple of things to the menu, and they opened up a couple more stores. Huge lines of people. Everybody loved it. So then they opened up a couple more stores. Huge lines of people. Everybody loved it. So they took out a loan of a few $1 million, opened up like a half a dozen stores. Huge lines of people. Everybody loved it. So they took out a couple $1 million more in loans and opened up a few more stores. So huge lines of people. Everybody loved it. So they took out a few $1 million more in loans, and a few million more in loans, and a few million more in loans, until they had hundreds of stores all across the country. But they had so many loans out that despite the fact that every single Boston Market store individually was running a huge profit, the entire combined profits of the stores was not enough to pay the interest on all those loans. And the entire company went bankrupt.
It's not a franchise, Solitude. It's Boston Market.
So it was a huge. Well, Boston Market. What's left of Boston Market? The company Boston Market went bankrupt, and what's left of them is now owned by the McDonald's Corporation.
Okay. Because someone actually did a calculation in Wall Street Journal that even if we tax 95% of all the billionaires' income, it will only be enough to run the government for 1 year. So raising taxes is not sustainable, even if we confiscate somehow every billionaire's wealth.
Yeah, seriously, there's only I believe half a dozen or so Boston Market restaurants still in existence, and they sell like frozen products in grocery stores, but yeah, it's owned by McDonald's. It's not the original Boston Market company anymore, which is too bad.
Yeah, debt is a risky thing, and unfortunately, our
never go into debt to open up a restaurant. And because what you should do, the way to do a franchise is you open up a restaurant. Once that restaurant, you've acquired enough money to pay cash for another restaurant, that's when you open up the second one. When those two restaurants have given you enough money for a third, that's when you open up the third one. When those three restaurants have given you enough money for a fourth, That's when you open up the fourth, and so on. And then you have healthy growth, and your growth rate is determined directly by how much profit you've made. And you never have any debt. And so that when you get hundreds of restaurants across this country, now you're just raking in millions of dollars.
Exactly. Instead of trying to make the interest payments.
Yeah. But they just couldn't pay all that interest on because they had hundreds of loans, and each of those loans was for millions of dollars. And it was just stupid. Yes, I know. We're talking about chicken.
And our government is $28.5 trillion in debt, and that's definitely bigger than the whole economy. And unfortunately, we will probably have to raise taxes to pay for the baby boomers' Medicare and Social Security, as much as that's an unpleasant thing to do. I don't see how else the money can be raised to keep this Ponzi scheme going that the federal government is.
Hey, Bert, so I guess there's some Boston markets around New York. I didn't know that. But I haven't worked for them since the 90s, so they may have added quite a few since then.
Yeah, so but they were all corporately owned, as far as I understand, right?
When I was there, when I was with them, yeah, they were all owned by Boston Chicken Incorporated, but Boston Chicken Incorporated went bankrupt.
It's fascinating. In Russia, all the McDonald's were corporately owned because the franchisors were getting shook down for taxes by the corrupt officials, so they figured only the corporation can deal with the tax authorities on national level instead of throwing the franchise owners to the wolves.
And Cinnabon, in Moment of Insanity, says there's nothing wrong with debt. Well, Cinnabon, I completely disagree with you. Johnny says, I don't think Boston Market, maybe they're not currently owned by McDonald's, but yeah, they definitely were when they went bankrupt. I don't know if they went independent again, but I can only go by when I worked there. I apologize if I spoke out of turn there, but I'm only telling you what I knew of them.
I was having a conversation with Jay Jeffrey in the chat. I told him that why doesn't he just make a check to the IRS instead of having everyone pay for taxes? He said, I'm only one person. He's like, well, I told him, what if all the liberals, 80 million of them, pay taxes voluntarily? That's
the problem is there's not enough money. People think that, we just need more money. Anybody that thinks we just need more money doesn't understand money. There's not enough money.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind for Bill Gates and George Soros to write checks to the IRS instead of trying to use the system.
You know what? I'd rather have Bill Gates or George Soros write a check to me.
Me too.
And so
yeah.
I'm not going to try to. Bill Gates, if you're seeing this, buddy, send me. I'm not greedy. Just send me a couple $1 million. And
Jay Jeffrey answers, there are fewer than 8 billion humans on Earth. Taxes are not paid voluntarily. People are motivated by incentives. There's no reason for a person to pay anything voluntarily.
Sure, yes. There is. You say you want to. The motivation to pay something, and actually, I will disagree with you completely on that, Jeffrey, because people pay. There is actually a very specific tax that millions upon millions of people pay voluntarily. Constantly, including myself, and that tax is referred to as a tithe, which is a tax that they pay to the church. It's a 10% tax that people pay to their local church in order to keep their church operational. And we do, in fact, 10% of everything that we make goes to our church, the Experience Community Church. And so that is a voluntary tax. And the reason that we pay that voluntary tax is because our church is very transparent with what they do with every dime of that money. And so we know what our money is being spent on. So no, there absolutely is ways to incentivize people to pay taxes.
Yeah, I would gladly do that if there weren't other taxes around all the time competing for for the free money.
And Johnny said, thanks for what you do, by the way. Debt can be a good tool, but it can absolutely strangle you. I tend to believe that, well, debt can be, I think debt can be a necessary evil. But I do not, I don't believe that it's a good thing. And when I say a necessary evil, I mean that, for example, to buy a home, most people have to go into debt, right? Because most people don't have $100,000 or more lying around, right? So you have to get a mortgage, but you should also work to pay off that mortgage as quickly as possible. And that's something like talking about the church again. Our church has a $5 million building. Now, we didn't take out a mortgage with a bank. What we did was we set up an agreement with the owner of the building and said, we're going to pay you directly. We're not paying any interest. We're just paying him the $5 million, and we made the agreement that we would pay him in less than 5 years, and we'll have him paid off by the end of this year, and this year will mark year 3.
Cinnabon says that's not a that's a donation, not a tax.
Actually, in the Bible, it is a tax. It is called the temple tax, actually. And it is just because our government considers it a donation because it's not going to our government. But it is actually, we consider it a tax.
What would have happened in the biblical times for those who don't pay their temple tithes? Excommunicated somehow, or maybe? It
was considered a requirement. I mean, depending on we'll just say that it would not be a good idea. Depending on exactly when it was that you were living, it could mean anything from basically exile to straight up execution, depending on.
Yeah, well, we saw what the Sadducees did to Jesus. I'm sure they could use their influence.
Press Brain Spec says Cinnabon hates you now. I hope not. Fed says debts are like home loans can be beneficial in that they can be used to procure things that will generate wealth for you, like homes, etc., if possible, investments. But you see, that's the problem, Fed. And that's where I think people have an unhealthy attitude about debt. Homes should not be looked at as something to generate wealth. And that's where people go so wrong these days, because people think their home is an investment to gain wealth as opposed to a place to live. And that's why we have this artificially inflated home market that will eventually collapse. And when it does collapse, people are going to start screaming how unfair it is and start begging the government for more bailouts and crap like that. And the simple fact is that the home market is artificially inflated right now. Our home
in 2008. So.
Our home is currently worth in the market somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $450,000, and I'm sorry, that is way too high a number. And
are you using Zillow?
Huh?
Are you using Zillow, Salty?
Zillow puts our house at, I think, around let me see. I'd have to look it up, but I think Zillow puts our house at around 425 or so. But no, it's not. Our market here in Middle Tennessee is going through the roof.
Wow.
And
I'm surprised because it's not really that warm.
Yeah, here it's going crazy. When we bought the house for $200.
Yeah.
And
I bought mine for $70. It's $140 now. So
yeah.
But I don't believe it.
Yeah, so we, which is a good thing in our case because we need to sell it, but the problem is that as the market continues to escalate like that, eventually gets to a point where nobody can afford a house, and then people default on their bank loans, and look at what happened back in 2008. Except it'll be 100 times worse.
People don't want to learn the hard lessons about fiscal responsibility. Don't spend more than you have. But there's something in the human brain that says since we're mortal. We gotta consume as much as possible today, carpe diem. And
Right. But there's nothing wrong with having a nice home. I mean, I love the house that we have. But I would keep this home if we could. But just being realistic about it, we can't afford the mortgage, and that's why we're looking at selling it. And we're just lucky that the house has gone up in value. But but honestly, even if the house had stayed at the same value, we'd still have to look at selling it. We'd just be having to look at moving to an apartment instead of getting another house.
Have you looked at refinancing? Rates are still low right now.
We don't want another. I'm going to be living off of Social Security. We don't want another mortgage.
Well, it could be a smaller payment. That's why.
I understand that, but we are going to be debt free. Because I'm not going to have, we're not going to have any extra income. So I'm going to be, except for whatever trickles in from YouTube. So we're going to make sure that we are stable with whatever Social Security gives us. And the only way to do that is to be debt free. Johnny asks, how long do you think until the home market crashes? I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball.
I mean,
hopefully not until after we sell this place.
I think that's also another reason why Jesus got such a big following. He was suggesting bringing back the practice of Jubilee, where every 50 years everyone's debts would be forgiven. I forgot where it says that in the Gospels, but I do remember him talking about that somewhere. Right.
Well, the idea of Jubilee is that you would forgive any debts that anybody held against you. And how are the property taxes in Metropolis? I'm not sure. But even if they're a little bit higher than they are here, if we don't have a mortgage, we'll be okay.
Yes, I'm sure that excluded big organizations, just individuals, the Jubilee concept.
Let's see. And Robert, actually, one of the things that we plan on doing when we move is that, because, it'll be kind of a reorganization thing. Is that we'll be setting up the 3D printers in such a way that I'll be able to use them again. Because like right now, the reason I haven't been able to do anything with the 3D printers is I can't physically access them. But I'll be able to reset everything up in the new place in a way that I'll be able to access them again. I'll build a shelf, or I probably won't build it, but I'll get someone to build it so that I can access it from a chair on, like an office chair on wheels that at a proper height, so that I don't have to stand up and reach for stuff like I do now. Bert says you should have a mortgage so you can get the tax write-off, even if you have the money to pay it off in the bank. Talk to an expert, please. Bird, that is the dumbest thing. I'm sorry. No, you should not be paying. First of all, you pay more in interest than you gain in tax write-offs.
Come on the stream, Bird. Come on.
Look, I understand you get a benefit. I mean, because look, we do our taxes each year, and I know you get to write off the interest from your mortgage on your taxes, but it's not a dollar for dollar gain on your taxes unless you're cheating on your taxes, and we don't cheat on our taxes. So, you still pay more for your interest than you gain. So why would I want to pay $10 to gain $5? That makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
And why have a debt that I have to manage if I can be debt free?
Speaking of debt, I wonder how many Starfleet recruits just go there to pay off their student loans.
I don't think they have student loans in Starfleet. Did you know that Cinnabon is a TOS hater and a Discovery lover? Well, of course, Cinnabon is a weirdo.
Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah.
I can understand liking DS9 more than TOS, but
And Fed says, so the anti-tracker 3D printing shack is coming online. Actually, funny you should put it that way, Fed, because depending on we've been looking at a few houses in Metropolis, and some of them actually literally have like little workshop type sheds on the property. So it could literally be a 3D printing shack. So yes, that is a possibility. You forget the bird is a Kurogan. That's true. So, of course, he cheats on his taxes.
I'm sure I'll understand the whole Kurogan Kurdistan thing in the future.
Well, you know, bird is a Kurogan, and so all you have to know is that makes him evil.
Speaking about Cinnabon, perhaps he has a hard time getting through the TOS episodes because they feel like they're longer because there's often no B-plot. Except
Cinnamon, the link is in the chat. Come on right now and tell me why you think TOS is garbage.
I mean, and I can say why I think DS9 is better than TOS just because.
Because you're wrong.
Yeah. Their ability to tell longer stories like the Dominion arc, TOS just has like individual brilliant episodes, but not a collective chain of brilliant episodes like Rocks and Shoals. And when they have a weak episode like Sons and Daughters that Bird just watched, it doesn't really bring it down as much as it does in TOS because you're not going to watch the alternate factor unless you're getting paid for it.
Jordan says, if you're in a bigger town, BlackRock will buy it for double what it's worth. Bought the house for $1 million. They bought a house for $1 million over asking price. I don't even know who BlackRock is.
They're a private investment company. And they're getting into the real estate business now. They have some connections to some of the administration right now.
Johnny Shunder said it would be paying $10 to get $1.50 back. Yeah, I don't get why. Yeah, having a mortgage just for the tax write-off doesn't make any sense. It's not well written on that. I don't know why you think that, but okay. I mean, I think you're confusing TOS with Discovery. I think that's your problem. I think you're getting them reversed.
Bad acting, I don't know.
I mean, bad acting. It's 60s style, so I can understand like the kind of melodramatic acting of the 60s. While some people might find that a turnoff, but Shatner is actually a far better actor than many people give him credit for.
Agreed. I think what we were talking about at the pre-question thing that I watched a little pre-question of Trek stream, you mentioned that why Kirk's character is a little different from the way Shatner acts. I think there's also that factor that Kirk is about the same age as the other senior officers, maybe even younger than Spock, so he maybe is overcompensating a little bit for not being older than his subordinates, being the same age. He needs to be a little bit more aggressive to compensate for that.
Yeah,
maybe in Shatner's mind, at least, he is.
And Feds, on the note of Trek, thoughts on the latest offerings from Lower Decks. That's the one with the testing, right? I'm always getting confused. Where they went into the little hollow suites and did the testing on, and Boimler was doing the Borg simulation. I thought that it was really, really good. I thought that once again Boimler showed his resourcefulness and leadership capabilities. I thought that it's actually, the show is really showing how it's shining as they're incorporating more stories involving the main crew along with the Lower Decks crew, kind of showing them both like what Captain Freeman and her crew are doing at the same time that we're seeing the Lower Decks people. And except for, I think that they went a little too far with the stupid over-the-top sex stuff in the Naked Now scenario. I think that went way too far. Like, I can't tell where he ends and I begin. That crap. I think I think they took it too far. But other than that, exceptionally good episode. I thought it was funny. Don't get me wrong, Stanley. I do think the bit was funny, but I think they took it too far. Same thing, it's like with the Mugatu. I think the Mugatu bit was funny, but then they took it too far with the horn. I thought that the Naked Now bit was funny, but I thought that the one dude riding the other and the one dude spread eagle with the censored bleep thing was too much. We didn't need them to take it that far. If they cut those two parts out, I would have just thought it was hysterical. Fed says, I like the demonstrated Boimler's perfectionist streak and honestly outed himself as Starfleet version of ye humble game completionist. Yes, indeed. Robert says, my really complaint and concern about TOS Enterprise and other TOS starships was lack of escape pods, really, really short-sighted. Well, you know, they figured they had Captain Kirk. They didn't need to escape.
Cinnabon, if you don't come on, I'll assume you're just trying to get attention by taking a contrarian viewpoint.
I think that's all he's doing. I don't think Cinnabon actually believes any of the stuff he's putting in the chat. I think he's just doing it to troll. Fed says, oh, yes, that part did make me twitch, the Naked Now stuff. Yeah, I think that they took it too far. I get what they were doing. They were making fun of the fact that in the Naked Time, the virus brought out the innermost thoughts of the crew so that you could kind of see parts of their personality that was hidden and layered and all that. And in the Naked Now, everybody just got horny and had sex. And that was stupid. And so they just took that to the next level. But I think
is you got to have your characters developed a little bit,
right,
to do that kind of episode.
But they took it too far. And you're right, Carlo. Technically, the primary hull is the escape pod. That's true. Although in the technical manual, it's referred to as a lifeboat. Because they...
Right. Salty, how can you say that TOS is better than DS9 was Season 3 and of TOS?
Why not?
Because Season 3 had maybe 2 or 3 decent episodes and the rest were clunkers.
First of all, I think saying 2 or 3 decent episodes is to overlook a lot of good episodes.
The one with the cloaking device, I liked. The one where they had the entity have everyone fight each other. Other than that, Spock's brain, the empaths were complete misfires.
First of all, I think that Turnabout Intruder Turnabout Intruder was silly, but I actually thought was I think it highlights William Shatner's acting because I love the way that when he was Janice Lester, I thought that was hilarious. So I think as an unintentional comedy, I actually really liked it. All Our Yesterdays, good episode. Savage Curtain, while kind of odd, I thought it was overall good episode. Cloudminders, good episode. The Way to Eden sucked. Requiem to Methuselah, not bad. Lights of Zatar, meh. That Which Survives was okay. Mark of Gideon, good episode. Let That Be Our Last Battlefield, one of the best social commentary, in fact, the best social commentary episodes in all of Trek.
Yeah, a lot of people overlook that because it actually criticizes both sides for the racism, not just the pressure.
Whom Gods Destroy, good episode. Elan of Troyes, one of Matthew's favorite episodes, not bad. The Empath, nah. Wink of an Eye, decent episode. Plato's Stepchildren, decent episode. Tholian Web, good episode. For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky, decent episode. Day of the Dove, great episode. Spectre of the Gun, decent episode. Is There in Truth No Beauty, decent episode. And The Children Shall Lead, okay, that one was garbage. The Paradise Syndrome, decent episode. Enterprise Incident, great episode. Spock's Brain, I think gets a lot of hate, but I actually like that episode. So, out of the 24 episodes, there are 2 episodes that I said were garbage. So, you're hating on Season 3, but I don't think Season 3 was all that bad.
Yeah, maybe it's because Spock's brain really gets it off to a bad start. But
But you see, I like Spock's brain, but now granted, I think the reason I like Spock's brain is because that was the first episode I saw as a child.
mine was Spectre of the Gun, so I love that one.
Well, I was born
I know.
before Spock's brain came out. Then I saw Spock's brain. So
Yeah, I watched them out of order before watching them in
Right.
order. So. Because there's not much continuity, it's not a big deal. Because like the cloaking episode doesn't make sense after what we learned from Balance of Terror. It should have been before. The Enterprise incident should have happened before. What's it called? The season 1 episode, the good one, the submarine one.
Balance of Terror.
Balance of Terror. Yeah, it should have chronologically taken place before because.
Well, no,
they don't
because
know
because remember, Balance of Terror, they'd never heard of a cloaking device.
But but in the Ultimate Computer, they say, in the Enterprise incident, they say that they haven't heard of one either.
Now, in the Enterprise incident, they say that they had a new cloaking device that the sensors couldn't pick up at all. Because remember, in Balance of Terror, the sensors could still pick up the Romulan ship. They just couldn't pinpoint it. They could just tell. They could tell it was out there. They could tell what direction it was moving, but they couldn't pinpoint its location. The new cloaking device that they developed in the Enterprise incident, the sensors picked up nothing until the ship decloaked.
Ah, okay, I missed that.
So it was an improved cloaking device that they were after.
All right. Yeah, I mean, that beats DS9 Season 1, for sure. TOS Season 3.
And Cinnabon says, thinking TOS is garbage is a dumb way to get attention. I agree. So, so we agree on something, Cinnabon. Don't know why you're saying that then.
Yeah, he outside was
Maybe you
someone
should
else,
stop
he was
saying that.
Yeah. It's definitely Star Trek would not have been the franchise it was if it was garbage. There would never have been any follow-up.
Robert says even the Enterprise D didn't have escape pods. I think that if you look at the technical manual, I think there are escape pods on the Enterprise D, but honestly, I don't really worry about that too much because the Enterprise D is just designed to have warp core explosions at the drop of a hat, so it just immediately blows up. So no time to get to an escape pod anyway. And Jordan says, so the primary hull's like the lifeboats on the Titanic? Yes.
Oh man, Cinnabon just keeps repeating the scene. All right.
Yeah. Because it is garbage, says Cinnabon. Yes, again, Cinnabon trolling, just trying to get attention.
Yeah, I'll admit I was a little bit stereotyping Season 3. When Salty read out the episodes, I said, yeah, it's not as bad as...
See, I think people tend to think Season 3 was bad because Season 3 did have 2 of the worst episodes.
Yeah.
And Season 3, Spock's Brain, I will admit, was a silly episode. I don't think it was bad, like as bad as people make it out to be. But I think it was a silly episode. And Turnabout Intruder was not a great episode to finish on. So the season started and finished on weaker episodes, and 2 of the worst episodes are peppered in there. So people forget that in there, though, are some of the best episodes of all of Trek.
Yeah, and all of our yesterdays is the real finale for me in my headcanon.
And also keep in mind that this is before the days of season finales and stuff like that.
Yeah, they were all meant to be standalone episodes, and that's
Right.
why DS9 doing an arc was so difficult for the producers for Ira Bear to get, because the producers assumed that people were not going to tune in episode after episode. You got to give the casual viewers something to look forward to. But, I might say that DS9 and TOS are such different animals. It's really hard to objectively compare them. It's gonna, because I grew up with DS9 and I watched it episode after episode, so of course I'm gonna be biased towards that over TOS, but I think some of the messages in TOS are definitely stronger than DS9 to an extent. Like, yeah, the whole let that be your last battlefield. Hey, doggy.
She's sleeping. Of course, that's what she does most of the time.
Hey, I sometimes use podcasts to help me sleep, so I can understand her. Especially if the voice is like bird of praise.
Of course, I understand why Cinnabon is so crazy. He does think that the Enterprise D is a good-looking ship, so...
It's decent. I mean,
I think problem with Cinnabon is he's just kind of snapped because he's been trying to put together that, you know, $10,000 Enterprise D model, and then they just said that they're going to not ship him all the parts. So, you know.
I never had the patience to put all together the whole model, so I salute Cinnabon for doing that. That's impressive. But I would love to hear some arguments from him, though, because
well, his argument is that he doesn't like it.
Perception, because obviously some people like Discovery. As much as I hate to admit it, it does have season 2 is decent.
Well, most of the people that I've heard that try to defend Discovery, it's about they argue diversity and they argue the visual effects. Which I grant you that the show has diversity and visual effects, but to me, that's not telling me the quality of the show.
Yeah.
That's,
exactly.
You know, and so, you know, that doesn't tell me anything about the quality of the show other than the people that are in the cast and, you know, whether it had a budget. But the show, it rests on its writing more than anything else. And despite what Cinnabon thinks, I think the writing on TOS is second to none. I think that the writing on TOS is some of the best, in large part because it was genuine sci-fi writing as opposed to, you know, WB style writing.
Yeah, why can't we have someone like Harvey Ellison, even though I don't like him politically? He can go and write for some Trek episodes today. Someone like him, I mean, not him, but who is it? I don't even know who would be the equivalent of someone like that writing for Star Trek.
Well, the problem is that in the modern day, we don't have Viacom CBS isn't hiring sci-fi writers to write. They're just having a writer's room of television writers write. Yeah. And a show like Star Trek doesn't need television writers. They need sci-fi writers.
Yeah, I'd even go let Michael Crichton or Stephen King write an episode. Why not?
Well, I don't know that Stephen King would be a good choice for writing Star Trek, or even Michael Crichton. But I'm just saying that we need, but they need to find sci-fi. Like, I mean, there's a million sci-fi books out there. Find some good sci-fi books that are written by independent people.
As the ones I mentioned, who's on close to that level of recognition.
Well, I just say it doesn't have to be a big name like pop author. You know, there's just look at who's writing, decent sci-fi out there right now, and get them to write a script.
Yeah.
You know, and then you might have to make some changes if they don't get the characters. Just, you know, like Ellison, you know, he was writing Dr. McCoy selling drugs on the Enterprise. Yeah. You obviously got to change stuff like that because
I read the original script. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah. But you got to change stuff like that because obviously that would be out of character for McCoy. But you adapt whatever changes you need to make in order to make it fit. But you get real writers to write some of these stories, and all of a sudden you have something that could be really special. Instead, you just have a bunch of staff writers that are just writing, High School Musical in space. And that's just not very interesting.
Well, here's two of the Lower Decks producers taking a chance. Let some outsider write, because
Mike McMahon, the nice thing, Mike McMahon is the main guy on lower decks, and the difference is that Mike McMahon, he's a nerd like one of us, and he just loves Star Trek, but he also likes making fun of stuff, and so he's just, he's and of course he's one of the creators of Rick and Morty, and that's what he does, and he's done a good job of it. So Robert says, in Babylon 5, ships had escape pods. Cinnamon says, don't be mad that your favorite show is terrible. It's not. And Carlos says, I like that Doug Drexler said that the escape pods in the TOS Enterprise was under the hull plating for protection, and sections of the hull could blow away before the life pod jettison. Well, there you go.
Yep.
The Enterprise also had to wait until the shuttle bay was repursed. I don't even know what that word is, before anyone could enter the shuttle bay. Or repressurized, I think is what you mean, before anyone could enter the shuttle bay. That's true. There are enough fan-made stories out there that could they could use for actual episodes. They own the IP, so they could just use it, though they should be able to write fantastic stories by themselves. Yeah, but if they actually did use one of the fan-made stories, like let's say that they took one of the fan films out there and adapted it, they would have to legally give credit to, they would have to pay that fan and give them a writer's credit. If they didn't, then that fan could sue them.
That's why they had to change the Tom Paris character, because Ron Moore wrote that Academy episode in TNG where the actor who plays Tom Paris had a different name, but they changed it to Tom Paris not to pay Ron Moore royalties for Voyager.
Stanley says, really, McCoy had a gig on the side providing special in-quarters hypo sprays. Yes, indeed.
We can't say hypo spray.
Mercer asks, what Trek episodes offended you? Well, in classic Trek, meaning Trek prior to 2009, honestly, the only episode that I would say really offended me would probably be Who Watches the Watchers. That episode offended me.
I know what you're talking about.
But, that's the only one that pops into my head, at least. I'm sure there are others that I'm just not. Maybe Threshold a little bit, because just playing so fast and loose with. Honestly, I could probably come up with at least a dozen episodes of Voyager where they just treat science so poorly, but Threshold is just the king of it.
How about that TNG environmentalist episode when they had that anomaly that was caused by the warp factors, and they were just preaching environmentalism the whole.
Nah, that didn't bother me as much. That was just an allegory for emissions. I get it, but it was, it wasn't like. Because the whole preaching about the evils of religion was so on the nose, and that one was just a bit much.
Michael Crichton voted for Biden, Bert says.
Yeah, if you know what I mean. Well, I don't care if Crichton voted for Biden. I don't care if he's a liberal, because, heck, most creative talents are. John Meyer says, if this guy is the conservative Trekker, does that make him the anti-Shives? Well,
yes.
No. Well, in a sense, yeah, he's got about the opposite number of subs. And Cinnabon says fan films are horrible. Well, on that, Cinnabon will generally agree. I think that with very few exceptions, the fan films are horrible. I'm not a big fan of fan films. And for a number of reasons, I don't enjoy them very much. I think that fan films, they tend to, it's kind of funny. Fan films are a lot like Discovery. They tend to look great and then suck.
Oh!
Did
you read what Berta Frey wrote?
Huh?
Berta Frey wrote, Michael Crichton's been dead for 10 years.
So he voted for Biden. I get it.
Oh my God. That's a good one, Bird.
I didn't even know that.
But I just meant someone on his level, Bird, not him.
So yeah, obviously you can see I follow authors really closely. But yeah, I didn't know Michael Crichton was dead. But
some of the David Gerald wrote some of the fan films with the scripts that got rejected by Gene for TNG, but I didn't care for them. They're even more woke than Discovery.
well, like I said, most of the fan films that I've watched tend to be, ooh, wouldn't it be cool scripts. So they come up with these ideas where, ooh, wouldn't it be cool if we, and then fill in the blank. They might come up with an interesting idea, and then it falls apart from there.
Yep. Unfortunately, that's the case.
Yeah. And usually, now it varies, varying degrees depending on the production, but usually they'll put a lot of effort into making beautiful looking visual effects, and authentic looking sets and stuff like that. But then then the acting will be horrifically bad, and most of the time the uniforms will look laughably bad. And
Axonar ruined it for making good fan films.
Yeah.
By being too greedy. But yeah, I like that one where What If Kirk Was Never Born? That was a good fan film, and because and then they have to have Charlie, who's grown up now, save Kirk from by being born, because what's his name from Gary Mitchell ends up ruling the galaxy, and Chekhov is like a rebel who's fighting him.
Jordan said, I thought you would say Code of Honor. No, Code of Honor, look, Code of Honor is kind of borderline racist, but it is kind of borderline racist. Like, I think that they were very insensitive in the way that they treated that culture. But at the same time, I think that it could have been a whole lot worse. I don't think they were intentionally being racist. I think that they were just being kind of insensitive. But with Who Watches the Watchers? No, they were being intentional.
Yeah, pushing the agenda.
Yeah, that was absolutely intentional.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of worked on me because I was very impressive at the time when I was much younger, and kind of the atheism that TNG was pushing kind of worked for me until I grew up out of it. So I can definitely understand why you would be offended, because I took all that to heart that they were pushing in Who Watches the Watchers.
Right, and I didn't like that. If I didn't mind, like, even though I didn't think it was their strongest episode, like when Nagilum was questioning Picard about his beliefs, that scene didn't bother me. But when you have Picard and the archaeologist ranting about the dangers of religion, yeah, no thank you. So
yeah, it's pretty presumptive.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you.
So nobody else is coming on. I've been streaming for 3 hours. You're all a bunch of jerks for not coming on. Especially you, Bird.
And Cinnabon, you gotta...
And Cinnabon.
There's one fun film that had good TOS says. Okay, whatever.
You guys are the worst, because you won't come. Cinnabon keeps, like, like you came on like 3 times for half a second the other day. I see what you were doing there.
Okay. You can say he came on, but never really did.
Yeah, he was faking it. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sure if you announce that you're going to be doing the StreamYards in advance, you'll get more tickets.
Nah, nobody wants to come on because they're all afraid of me. They're afraid of dealing with the salt man. I see how it is.
The worst thing is that you'll learn something, like I did.
Sure, you're busy, Cinnamon. Sure. Busy doing nothing.
You wouldn't be here if you were busy. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good rest of the day. Have a good Sunday. Are you going to church today? Or?
No. We do church on Saturday.
Wow.
And Wesley, how you doing, buddy? Oh, by the way, Wes, yeah, the reason we couldn't get into the next act is because it has to be in your game since you hadn't completed the act yet. So what we need to do is the next time we play, you need to create the game and then I join you. That's how we do it. And so whoever is less far along needs to host the game. That's what we got to do. So I don't know what your schedule's like, though. Hit me up on Skype and we'll talk. Anyway, guys, so, and we'll probably do some Diablo later on or something. And, yeah, and Bird's a jerk because, you know, he's Kurogan. So live long and prosper, and there goes Alex. So have a good one, and don't forget that you are the salt of the earth, but I am the salty trekker. And, yeah, Kapla and Jolan True and live long and prosper and all that. And don't forget something. I don't know. I always forget what I'm